Would you identify yourself, please?
Can you repeat that, Kim, please?
Call-in user 7155 ending in 92.
That's me, Kim. Erin Crawford.
Okay, thank you.
Oh my God. It's still like your socks saying three pairs of those. Mm-hmm.
And blue.
They made a white pair?
Yeah.
I could wear that one myself. Don't do that, Larry. Don't do something different.
Better mute yourself pretty quick. I'm going to say something you're going to regret. We'll figure out there's a...
One more call-in user ending in 92. Would you identify yourself, please? What was that one?
I think Aaron was. Aaron. All right, being 7 o'clock, I will call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. Following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will have the reading of the notice, please.
An educational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors will be held at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, at 7 p.m. on July 14th, and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
And thank you. I would like to request everyone please silence their cell phones or put them on vibrate and any other electronic devices as to not to be an interruption to the meeting. And we will move on then to item number 5, and that is roll call. And I would ask the supervisors that are present, please sign in and to the electronic recognition machine. And thank you, everyone. I would like to welcome all of the visitors that we have here with us this evening. And also I'd like to extend a appreciation and a welcome to the visiting audience that we have that is viewing the meeting tonight. And so we will move on to item number 7, and that is public comment. We do have 8 people that have signed up for public comment. I am going to then therefore extend the public comment a little bit to allow for each individual that is speaking to address the board for up to 3 minutes. I also am going to try to and have implemented Robert's Rules of Order, which basically identify when you have individuals that address the board, if you have multiple people speaking on the same subject, that there will be alternating, one that may be in favor and one against. Robert's rule says that you are to alternate, and therefore I'm going to do that and try, and that may mean that some people have signed up at a different time, and it is not my preference to show any preference. It's just providing that individuals will be alternated, one for, one against. And so the order in which we'll have public comment tonight, first we'll have Representative, we're proud to have Representative Pat Schneider with us. We have also, we have next, second will be Tanya Reilly. Third will be Patrick Schmidt. Fourth will be Joanne Leonard. Fifth will be Matthew Barnes. Sixth will be Aaron Crawford. Seventh will be Clint Resch. And eighth will be Shanti Tarpey. I apologize if I mispronounced that name. So first, I would extend to Pat. We'll also have a timer, and I will also call out roughly 15 seconds prior to the end. That time is about to expire. So, Mr. Representative Schneider, please.
Good evening, everyone. I am Representative Pat Snyder, 129 Charles Schofield in Marathon County. I am currently the chairman of the Children's and Families Committee, have been for the last 2 sessions, was on the committee my first session. I was the chair of a foster care task force back in 2017. I also was on the adoption task force the following session. This is an area that is very near and dear to my heart. Back last session, the Trump administration came out with their Family First agenda, and that is trying to keep, their whole hope is trying to keep families together. And the trauma that these kids go through when they're removed from the home is something that, unless you've seen it and experienced it, it's tough to be removed from their parents. Now, not to say that there aren't some bad parents, and that's working on trying to get things where we can get these kids into a loving environment. This Family First is new. We had to allocate a little money last session in order to be able, we were one of the last states to get on this nationwide, but it is going to provide money to be able to help these families that are struggling to get back on their feet and move forward. This is something that will be helpful. This will be something that will actually save money down the road because of taking these children out, putting them in foster care. And let me tell you, if for the families that aren't getting reunited, for the parents that don't follow what the court ordered and get themselves back together, these kids are in foster care. And if they age out of foster care, more than likely they'll be homeless, or worse yet, they'll be incarcerated. So for the folks that like to crunch the beans, that means that we're paying a lot more for them rather than investing early and trying to get these kids in a stable situation. Now, this is a one-time grant. We're one of 3 counties in the state, 72 counties, and we're one of the 3 counties because of the housing shortage. And this is a way to be able to get these families together, start to heal, and then hopefully get on their feet and be able to move forward. If they are an addiction problem, they relapse, the kids will then be removed again and we'll move forward to try to get them in a safe environment. When I open up my committee every session, I tell all of my committee members that the main theme of Children and Families, the best interest of the child. So this is federal money that'll be coming out. I plan to have a informational hearing this winter from the National Committee on state legislatures to tell us exactly what the Family First program will mean down the future, because I'm confident there'll be more federal money coming in that direction. So I hope that you will approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was remiss in providing some original direction. First off, any public comments, we will have decorum. I will not allow any personal attacks. And also, if your comments have been presented by other individuals, by all means, feel you can acknowledge that you are in agreement with the other comments. Please try not to reiterate and repeat the comments. So next we have Tanya Reilly. Tanya, please.
My name is Tanya Reilly, 223828 Orchid Lane, Wausau, Wisconsin, 54401. Tonight you will discuss the Family Keys project. I ask you to pause and think critically about this new demonstration project, which is a pilot program that will use children in a grant-funded experiment. It's meant to show what could work and what might not work. Fine and dandy, but who keeps these children from becoming victims of exploitation as we are learning and discovering the parts of the program that might not work? First, ask yourself some questions that need to be asked with every funding proposal that comes across your desks. Number one, follow the money. Where exactly is this funding coming from? What are all the organizations involved, and what are their motives and core values? Number two, are there any hidden agendas at a state or national level beyond local knowledge and influence? Number three, who monitors the program to make sure it is running as intended? The Family Keys project is especially concerning to me as children are involved in the experiment. Again, who keeps these children safe while the agencies involved are figuring out what works and what doesn't work with this demonstration program? Number four, will this put more control into the hands of local elected officials or into the hands of unelected bureaucrats? According to a director of social services at the 616 County Board meeting, the Casey Family Foundation is a funder of this project and very heavily involved. She was thrilled that they are at the table with us on this project. So what is behind the Casey Family programs? A quick online investigation at casey.org under Who We Are states, and I quote, "Our core values shape the way we work by guiding organizational decisions and actions." And their heading: diversity, equity, anti-racism, and anti-discrimination. Equity, equality, and inclusion. We believe in the intrinsic dignity and value of every person. We strive for fairness and justice in the way people, our staff, and our communities are treated and the opportunities they have to succeed by addressing racism, inequitable treatment, and other barriers to inclusion, end quote. So, is anybody else having flashbacks here? Does this sound familiar? It sounds exactly like the language of the woke, liberal, diversity, inclusion, and equity agenda of the Community for All proposal that created so much division in our county last year. Given their core values, what are the true motives of the Casey Family programs in regard to the Family Keys project? Please do your research. Figure out exactly what you're voting for before you decide to become complicit in this experimental program involving children. Always remember to follow the money and understand what agendas you are complicit in advancing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Patrick Schmidt. Patrick, please.
Hi, my name is Patrick Schmidt, 1710 Silver Lane, Wausau, Wisconsin, 54403. Couple things I would like to just share about myself before I share why I'm up here. One, I'm a licensed foster parent and have been for about 7 years now. I'm also the chair of the Citizen Review Panel. I'm a lifelong registered Republican, and I'm also a financial supporter of the Hagar House, which I believe many people in this room are aware of the Hagar House. And it would be my preference that we would meet our low-income housing needs all through private organizations, all privately funded. I would prefer that we meet all of these social issues that we have without having the government's involvement. But that isn't always the case. And right now we have a real practical problem that I've been living for the last 7 years as a foster parent who's had these kids in my care and lived this experience with biological families that aren't able to keep them, and sometimes, not always, are able to get them back, would be great parents, but don't have a place to house these kids. And so that's why I'm involved and was apprised of this opportunity. I spoke with the Hagar House today to find out what the capacity is there right now and what the interest level of it is. So what is the supply that they have, and what is the supply that the community has, and what is the demand, meaning what is the number of people that are in a situation where they need low-income housing to have a safe place for their kids. I learned today that they have at least 20 people that are interested in applying to live at the Hagar House, and that is way beyond the Hagar House's capacity. And I knew about this just as a foster parent and being in many situations where I was trying to help parents find an inexpensive place to live where they could safely raise their family. They'd met all the requirements to have their kids with them. They just couldn't find a safe place. And in the meantime, in some scenarios, while they couldn't find a safe place, they had to live in unsafe places, which oftentimes would lead them back down to an addiction path because they couldn't get away from the people, the unsafe people, because they couldn't afford another place to stay. So I think this is a great opportunity. Like I said, I would prefer not to use government dollars to do this, but we don't have enough infrastructure in place through privately funded organizations or individuals. So I think this is a prudent opportunity to use some government money to bridge a gap for a couple of years to provide a place for women or men or families to live and to safely raise children, to have accountability, and to give us 2 years to figure out how we can mobilize our local organizations and individuals to provide a long-term, more sustainable pathway for people who need low-income housing here locally. So I think this is a great opportunity. It gives us time to take advantage of a prudent opportunity to use some government funding to provide local resources for these people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have with us Joanne Leonard. Joanne, please.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this subject. I'm Joanne Leonard, 923 Maple Hill Road, Wausau, Wisconsin. I guess I better take these off the top of my head. I'm here to address the budget to accept grant funds for the Family Keys pilot project. First of all, I'm totally in favor of helping people and families be safe, secure, and in a loving unit. I understand the reason the Department of Social Services would apply for this experimental grant. These are dollars from the state and feds and will not have to be taken out of local tax levy. Marathon County received $26.3 million in ARPA funds. I've seen interesting programs funded with these dollars. To date, the county has allocated about $5.2 million, leaving $21 million to fund projects. Why couldn't ARPA funds be used to fund really important local projects like this that does not involve transitional living and communal living, as I call it? This would not add to the budget for future years, but be a one-time project, then assess the success, and if it proves to be cost-saving and successful as the project outline indicates, it could be added to the social services budget in the future. I find it disturbing that what likely were dysfunctional families at one time, i.e. there are serious reasons why children are removed from the family, why would you put 3 of these types of families together in one location? Mr. Leonard indicates transitional living has been used successfully for other serious issues, drug addiction, sexual abuse, etc. However, these transitional living environments are very different from putting adults and children in the same facility with the many problems that could occur. There are several programs to help families provide a safe environment for their children, which includes safe and adequate housing. I have a question about why in home services cannot be provided on an individual basis rather than the group home setting. Locks on doors does not give me a feeling of a safe and secure arrangement. I would like to see an assessment of the current child welfare arrangement in the county, how it could be improved, and how that could be done without getting the federal government involved in another part of the county business. We have an excellent social services department and a talented director. Having said that, I still cannot support taking more federal dollars with more intrusion into local control of family-related issues. Identify the barriers to assessing safe and adequate housing, cost, lack of upkeep, etc. Marathon County has many partners listed in their document to help people learn skills, both social, emotional, and job. Staffing the facility was the highest cost.
15
I'm
seconds.
asking the county board supervisors to vote no to this grant and look to local support and programs that can accomplish the same thing without putting all these families in one location with the perils that it presents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Matthew Barnes, please.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Barnes. I'm the Deputy Chief of Police for the City of Wausau Police Department. I'm also a resident of Knowlton, 148-130 Hosta Road. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. As a county resident, I'd like to thank everyone for your service. It's 7 o'clock at night, and you're here listening to people like me talk. As the Deputy Chief of Police, though, and someone that has contacted other law enforcement executives in our county to discuss the Family Keys Project, I'm here to ask you to vote yes. And the reason for voting yes is I'm aware of many of the concerns about the safety and the concern for the families that would be in that facility. Law enforcement has discussed that in depth and vetted those concerns and found none of them to be valid or concerns that we share as we have concern for the residents there or the members of this community. As a law enforcement officer for over 20 years in this community, I've seen a lot of really bad stuff. The hard stuff to deal with is when I've had to take a child out of the arms of a parent. Now, the parent had that coming because they were making decisions that weren't good and weren't in the best interest of that child. So with social workers, we're tearing kids out of the arms and everyone's crying and it's very traumatic. The thing that gives me some solace in doing that is, one, it's my job, and two, I get to say to those parents who are traumatized by their own actions, but I also get to say to the kids, and so do all of the officers that work within this county, that everyone is going to do everything in their power to get you in a better situation, to get you reconnected with your parents, with your mother, with your father. So much so that we have closets. Anybody that wants to see it, after the meeting, come to the police department and ask to see the closet of the go bags for kids of all different ages that we remove from their families. It includes deodorant, diapers, pajamas, clothing for the next day, for all the different ages of kids. Because that's a hard thing to do and it's very traumatic. And when we tell them we're going to do everything in our power as a government entity to reconnect you with your family, and we know that these parents have done the heavy lifting of dealing with their AODA issues, whatever the other criminal issues they were dealing with that allowed them to not be with their parents. And we tell them we're going to do what we can to get you back together. They do that work, and the only thing missing is stable housing. And we have an opportunity to provide that for those kids. There's not a good reason we can think of not to do that. And I would strongly encourage every one of you next week to vote yes for the Family Keys Project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Aaron Crawford. Aaron, are you online with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you, Aaron. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Great. Again, my comment is also regarding the Keys grant, and I just have several questions regarding that. I'd like to know where this is coming from. Is this really a need coming from our Marathon County? Is this something the county has wanted to expand into? Was our Marathon County looking to get into the business of expanding our efforts into public housing? Or does the county just see federal dollars up for grabs and we're chasing that? I'm asking supervisors to strongly consider what taking these dollars mean, and just remind our elected officials that when we've signed on to yet another government program. We're now setting a new precedence at the county level, opening the door to affordable housing. And then again, two, who's on the hook to continue to support the programs like these? All of the Marathon County taxpayers. Because when the 2-year grant is over, is the county going to remove the tenants out of this communal living situation? Of course not. This will forever be on the books and in the budget. And so I would just urge everyone to seriously consider accepting this federally funded grant. The county should not expand into this arena and expand the size of government. And the county taxpayers, we desire smaller government, and we do not need yet another government program. So just again, asking to strongly consider the KEYS grant, adding that onto our county budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Clint Resch. Clint, please.
Hi, good evening. Hey, Lance. Clint Roosh, 2103 Meadowbrook Way, Wausau. I just learned about the KEYS project last night. Yesterday morning, I was facilitating a smart recovery meeting, and two of the gals in the meeting had expressed that housing was the biggest issue. And I am a recovering addict. I have 9 years, almost 9 years of clean time. I am the first CCAR certified recovery coach in Marathon County. I run smart recovery meetings. I sponsor people in AA and NA, and I still involved in the OWI court program. When I heard about this grant, and I am not about expanding government, but is anybody else doing anything to help these people? Because it's a problem. This is a chance to unite parents with their children, children with their parents again. I never lost my kids, but there are times in my life when CPS came in my house, I could have lost my kids. I'm not a bad person. I was a drug addict. There's a physiological change in the brain, and people who haven't gone through that don't understand that. I asked you to approve because nobody else has anything else on the table. Nobody else has anything else in place to help these people, and they need, children need their parents, parents need their children. And they have accountability, from what I understand. And they have worked through a process, like myself, to build their life back. And housing is still an issue. And to be able to bring them together and do this, I think it needs to be done right away. It needed to be done years ago. This is one of the things that is something that I want to do as soon as I saw it. Sober living, sober housing is important, but even more so having sober living or sober housing with children, because a lot of these children are been separated from their parents because of drugs, probably the majority of them. And I'm grateful every day for the OWI Court program.
15 seconds.
It's a government program. It saved my life, and sometimes we need government programs to help us out and give people this is a temporary housing. People aren't going to want to stay there, but this gets them in a spot, gets them stable, and allows them then to have a reference to move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Shanti Tarpey. 4 more times.
Shantice Tarpey, 4405 Leduc Street in Weston. I am a teacher. I've been a teacher for 25 years, so I know about adverse childhood experiences. I've dealt with children in foster care and being removed from their homes. And I just spent the last 7 months detoxing a member of my family, not for the first time, not even for the second time, not even for the third time. I'll spare you those details. I tell you about that because from listening to the two meetings on the 16th and on July 6th, the presenters said that what they see most often in Marathon County is children are removed from their home due to neglect, which is usually due to substance abuse where the parents are doing drugs, quote, in a way that is unsafe for their children, end quote. There's drug paraphernalia in the home, or they're living with others who are doing drugs and have a criminal background that makes it unsafe. We see this very often is what we were told. It concerns me. I'm not an addict, but I have dealt with one for 14 years, and I know what relapse is. We were told in family counseling, relapse is a part of recovery. I just have concerns with putting children, up to 8 children in a home. No, I don't think drug addicts are bad people, but I know what happens with drug addicts. That concerns me. I believe in reunification. I think God created families to be together, not apart. I think that the biological bond between a child and their parent is unique, and no matter how strained it is, we have to give it love and support to help it thrive. And I believe that outcomes improve when children in foster care are safely reunited with their families, but based on what I've heard, safely is the key word. I don't think that this program will accomplish that. Here is just a sample of what I heard listening to the program. I feel like this is an experiment and children are lab rats. Okay, we will learn what may work and what may not work. Our goal is to find out what will work. We anticipate families will ... fill in the blank. This is a learning experience, a learning collaborative, a demonstration project that will result in proof of concept. Well, proof of concept is evidence that you obtain from a pilot project when you're trying to figure out if the program will even work or not. This is a really good opportunity for us to take federal funds and foundation dollars through the state and to actually see if the program works. We hope to know what the real benefit is for Marathon County. And when asked down the road where they see the project leading, the answer was, we don't know. We're going to see what we can learn from it. It's a, quote, project designed as it's going. This isn't a project. It's an experiment with children. We hope, we anticipate. Hope and anticipation are not a plan of action. Members of the board, you're being asked
15 seconds.
to go on the record to vote yes to spend $250,000 of taxpayer money to try an idea that people hope will work with no mention of what will happen if it doesn't. Please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. That ends our public comment, and I thank all of those who presented. Now we will move on to educational presentation reports. Item number 8A, department heads reports on roles and responsibilities. And first up, we have the sheriff, and we have Chief Deputy Billup with us this evening. Chief Deputy, please.
Thank you for having us here tonight. Sheriff Parks could not be here. He's out of town, so he asked me to step in and give you a little overview of the sheriff's office. Did you have something to present? So there's the picture of our sheriff, Sheriff Scott Parks. So you guys don't see it though, huh? All right. So you get to look at me instead. And here we go. So I'll give you a quick overview of a little bit of the sheriff's office. So the sheriff's office is the largest county department. We are responsible for the uniform patrol that you see on the street, for the jail, for the 911 center, for the detectives that do their work, and our clerical and administrative staff that put all that work together and make all the behind-the-scenes functions flow seamlessly. We have a number of special teams. We are partners with agencies like Deputy Chief Barnes is here tonight. Our SWAT team is a partnership with the Wausau Police Department. We have a crisis assessment response team that goes out and works with people in the community who struggle with mental illness, suicide prevention. We help with some of the homeless programs that Wausau is trying to work on and put together. So not only do we do the things that you would expect a sheriff's office to do, but we also do some of these other services and processes, projects that you're maybe not as familiar to you. I think that folks don't always understand what our role is at the sheriff's office, and there's a lot more behind the scenes that takes place. I'll give you an example. So I was recently at the National Sheriff's Conference, and at that conference, almost every single one of the seminars I went to was all about working with inmates and getting them prepared to go back out into the community. Now, one of the challenges that we have is that our inmate population is not like it used to be. It's incredibly diverse. The challenges that they have, the mental health issues, the substance abuse issues that we deal with are incredibly difficult and challenging. We have a social worker in the jail that helps manage all of those. Many people probably wouldn't realize that. We have a mental health professional assigned to us in the jail that helps prepare them for court, prepares them for just interactions with their cellmates or the people that are in the block with them. We provide religious services in the jail. We have full suite of medical services, educational programs. We partner with North Central Technical College, and we do a welding program, HSED, GED. All of these things to prepare people to go back out into the community and be productive. Now, as you look at the budget document that was prepared for 2022, I believe that's on the next page here, you're going to look at some of our priorities. Now, I talk a lot about the jail because really the jail is what drives the cost at the sheriff's office. One of the focuses that we've had for a number of years is driving down the inmate population. If we can safely do that, we save the taxpayers a considerable amount of money. About 3 years ago, 2018, 2019, on average, we had about 430 inmates in our jail at any given time. Our jail can only hold, maximum capacity is 279 inmates, and the state says that you have to have a buffer in there so that you can have room for incoming inmates. So we're supposed to be right around that 240 mark. So you ask yourself, well, if you have 430 inmates, where do they go? Well, they go to Lincoln, Langlade, Taylor, Columbia, Winnebago, Shawano County, Marquette County. That's where we were taking all of our inmates because we had no room. So knowing that, we put forth a great deal of effort, and one of our biggest partners was the Wausau Police Department, and we looked at different opportunities in order to interact with people in a different way and try to curb that input into our jail. As of, let's just say April of this year, summer's an anomaly for us. There's no doubt that we get busier in the summer and more people get locked up. But we were averaging right around 230 inmates in our jail, below the census that the state sets for us. We still had some medical protocols in there that had to keep some people housed out, but we were only housing 30 inmates at any given time. That was because of the efforts we had with our partners. What did that mean to our budget? We cut our out-of-county housing budget almost in half. Where we normally would spend about 1.4, 1.5 million a year, I think our budget this year, Lance, is $750,000 for out-of-county housing. And we are on target, even with our most recent challenge, and that is staffing. So the jail is having, as is the 911 center, having a very difficult time maintaining staff, keeping them there. When you're competing with private industry that offers all kinds of great opportunities, like working Monday through Friday, day shifts, no holidays, no weekends, we can't compete with that. That's very difficult. So we have to find a different set of people that are maybe more focused on community service. This is the type of work that they want to get in. And we were having a real hard time doing that, but we partnered with county administration, with Sarah Severson, the communications strategist for the county, and through her efforts and our guiding saying, and these are the people we're looking for, we've been able to bring some candidates in, and we're doing a better job of recruiting. Well, when you don't have staff, what do you have to do? Well, the first thing we did was we shut down our secure detention center, which means that's an impact on social services. That's a significant impact on social services, as well as patrol deputies who now have to transport youth all over the state. And when I say all over the state, I mean all over the state. So we brought those staff over. As quickly as you bring those staff over, family medical leave, military leave, retirements, you're at a deficit again. So we're constantly chasing that employment struggle within our jail. The 911 center is slightly better than that. They're doing a better job with their recruiting, but we still struggle there. I have Captain Milhausen with me here tonight, and the reason he's here is much of the budget talks about that division and what we were going to try to do. What we're working on is getting a metro area channel up for the police departments of Rothschild and Everest Metro. Their radio traffic is significant. It almost overwhelms that what we call Sheriff 1, to the point where our other municipal partners, State Patrol and some of them that need to get on, can't even get on the radio. So the county board, over the last 3 or 4 years, has helped us beef up those numbers in the dispatch center, but we can't find people, just like a lot of the other industries that are out there struggling. Captain Milhausen has done a great job of trying to bring those staff in and get up to staffing levels in order to open that channel. But we are now prepared to do that as soon as we get the next round of employees onboarded, which is going to take some time because of training people. It takes about 16 to 17 weeks to fully train a dispatcher as well as a corrections officer, and after corrections officers go to the academy. So those are highlights of some of the budget issues that we deal with. Now, the one example I want to share with you where we look at challenges into the future, I'll go with 3. One is staffing. Well, I want to put that right out there front and center, because if we can't recruit the right people with the right character, the right temperament, the right personality, we run into issues. We are very hopeful that the McGrath study that the county is undertaking will come back favorable, and that will provide opportunities for our staff. And I'm not talking just financial, but I understand that companies like McGrath look at total package. What creative incentives and opportunities are out there that we can market in order to bring the right people in the organization? The other thing we need to really focus on, and we've made it an effort, is mental health. We've worked a lot with our law enforcement partners, North Central Healthcare, social services, in order to address mental health needs in the community. And the other thing we need to work on is maintaining that jail population. If we don't maintain that jail population, the costs to this county are going to skyrocket. And we've seen it before when we had 430 inmates, and we don't want to go back there again. An example of how this happens is, and I know Deputy Chief Barnes is here, and I told him I was going to share this story, so it's not a poke in the eye to any agency, but there are individuals in our community who are need. They have a lot of needs. So there is an individual in the community who was a constant problem for a number of businesses, and it wasn't just here in Wausau, it was multiple businesses. And that person would get arrested on a regular basis. Ultimately, what has happened is that person was arrested about a year ago for vagrancy issues, urinating in public, defecating in public, no major crimes, but you should know that it's those types of things. Well, what's the underlying root cause? Mental health. So that person has been in our jail now for a year. We've stabilized that person because we are now providing the medications that person needs to the tune of $6,600 a month in medication costs for that one person. Our pharmaceutical bills at the sheriff's office in 2013 averaged about $13,000 a month. They're now $44,000 a month. And the vast majority are psychotropics. And what we have found, I mentioned that social worker earlier in the jail. What we have found is we release these people after they're done. They're done with their probation sentence or their probation hold. They're done with their general sentence, and they have nowhere to go. We actually received a small donation of $500 for whatever. We bought sleeping bags, and we have a stash of sleeping bags in the jail so that when someone is released and they have nowhere to go, we hand them a sleeping bag and we say, good luck. Because once they're no longer the responsibility of the county, we can't hold them here and say, we know you don't have a home, stay in our jail. It happened yesterday. We had somebody that did not want to leave the jail because they had nowhere to go. And the CART team and North Central Healthcare had to partner in order to try to find housing for that individual. There are no supportive housing opportunities for people that are criminally justice involved. It is incredibly difficult to get them the resources that they need. So what I learned at this recent conference, I'm kind of circling all the way back, is many of the communities that have been successful have a robust housing system of some sort for those folks. If you don't house them there, you're going to house them here. If you house them inside our walls, you're going to be talking, like this one individual, $6,600 a month minimum on many of these medications, because many of these folks are dealing with very difficult mental health and substance abuse challenges. If they're out, we don't pay that. So here's something that Representative Snyder is here. It's something that he worked on. He and Senator Petrusky moved forward, and it was successful. What used to happen is when an inmate came into our jail, they lose all their benefits. Their Social Security is gone. If they have Badger Care, that is gone. And when I say gone, I mean it's like they wipe the slate clean. You take somebody who's mentally ill or substance abuse addicted and you put them out on the street, they do not go and get reconnected with Badger Care or their Social Security. They don't know how. So what we were doing internally was we were partnering with the Bridge Clinic. Our social worker in the jail was working to reconnect these people with their benefits when she could, because people come and go from our facility every day. What we asked and has happened is now those benefits are suspended. So the minute that that person leaves our jail, automatically their benefits are reinstituted. So this gentleman I told you about at $6,600, if there was a way to find supportive, when I say supportive, I mean case management, somebody there watching, guiding, helping, directing their care and their daily activities, that would no longer be a $6,600 burden on the county. That would go to something like Badger Care or Medicare or Medicaid, whatever that program might be for that individual. So we are working very hard to only keep the people in our care that need to be there and find opportunities and help folks that when they have to leave, they leave with a step up and not with the challenges that many of them have. So when I talk about challenges, I really see the biggest risk that we face at the sheriff's office, aside from staffing is a big deal, but that inmate population has the potential to cost the county a lot of money in the future. Is there anything else you wanted me to cover, Lance, about our operations? Any questions?
Any questions for the Chief Deputy? Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you mentioned there were 230 inmates. My question would be, how many of those inmates do you see fitting into all of these kinds of programs that you just spoke about? If that makes sense. You see where I'm going with that, right?
I understand what you're asking. I would say 30 to 40 of those inmates likely would have the ability to be put into some sort of programming. Many of those inmates, if you look at our jail population and the types of charges that we have up there, many of them are just waiting for their day in court and they're going to be headed off to prison. But there is a segment of those people that are just, they get lost. They get lost in the shuffle.
So as a follow-up then, you would say 200 is kind of the number that would be continually needing to be there and getting processed. Okay, thank you.
Again, I would remind the supervisor we're using the request to speak feature on your iPad. Supervisor Zhang is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question for Chief Deputy Chad Billabong. I know in the past, one of the reasons why individuals were in the jail for a long time is due to the fact that they're also waiting to, some majority of them or a large amount of them were in there waiting to be sentenced. Is that still the case here as well too, or are these individuals typically, still going through trial? They're still waiting for the trial. I'm just kind of curious as well.
So, and I think that when we report on that, Supervisor Zhang, we confuse people because we talk about our inmate population as pre-sentence inmates and then sentenced inmates. So when you look at our total population of 200, let's just use the number of 240 inmates, on average, about 30 to 35 of them are sentenced. Everyone else is either on a probation hold or waiting for their trial, their court, whatever it might be to happen. Inmates that are awaiting a sentence in there that are held in the jail, there aren't many. It's primarily people that are just waiting to have a public defender appointed to them and get their court moving, and the delays that we deal with there.
Thank you.
Supervisor Stravinsky.
Thank you, Chairman. My question to you is, you did a wonderful job of describing the situation that you're dealing with, and I guess the way I'm hearing this is you have, out of the 230, 240, we have 200 who are going to be continually involved with the justice system, and they're not going to be out on the street anytime soon. So let's set those to one side. You've got this 30 to 40 odd individuals on a monthly basis. What is the percentage of those that you see back over and over and time again?
Almost every one of them. Very few of those people of that group are not cycling through regularly. We've had people that have been booked into our jail up to like 6 times a month, the same person. Booked in, booked out, booked in, booked out, because they get out and they don't have supports.
Okay, so let me follow up then, and let me just kind of pose a semi-rhetorical question. Is, with all the good intentions in the world, is what we are doing today working?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the Chief Deputy? Supervisor Wilhelm.
Now, with these people that are cycling in and out, the 30 or 40, now are these people that would be better in maybe like a group home situation, where there would be some care about, like, if they are receiving Social Security, that would help pay for it, or is that not possible?
It's not possible right now, the way we're set up. There are not group homes that are set up for that. The way it works in many communities where they're successful. Now, I would say that if we started today with a group home, we're probably 5 years behind many communities that saw this coming already, and we just haven't gotten there yet. Those group homes that we would be looking at having would have to have someone there as a case manager. There would have to be someone assigned to follow them to make sure that they're taking their medication. The biggest thing that we find with these people that cycle through, they're not taking their medication. So they'll have a court order commitment that says that they're supposed to have a shot monthly. They don't take it. And when they don't take it, they're manic. You get them stabilizing their medications. This gentleman I'm talking about in the jail that we're spending $6,600 a month on, he's not a problem in our jail because we've been medicating him and we're taking care of him. His medical needs are met. His food needs are met. We've done all that for him, but at a very high cost. If there were other opportunities, that's what we would likely need in the future.
Thank you.
Supervisor Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up to Supervisor Shrimpinski's question. Can you elaborate more on your answer, Chief Deputy? I know you answered no, but can you elaborate a little bit more?
The challenges that we face, and I would also welcome if Deputy Chief Barnes could probably speak to this because he sees it just as much as we do. The people that, I'll just say they fall through the cracks. They come in, they get released, whether it be on bond, a probation hold, whatever it might be, and they're back out on the street, and those supports aren't there for them. The police department is back dealing with that same person over and over and over and over again. If what we were doing worked, we wouldn't be doing that. And when we look at, we actually had in the past, and let's just say this is pre-COVID, we had a program that we worked on that we call the high utilizer group. So we can't know who North Central Healthcare's top 15 clients are. By HIPAA, they can't tell us that. But we can tell them who our top 15 repeat people coming through the jail are. And when we do that, they just give us a number back. Turns out the number that we were seeing and the number that they were seeing, the cross-section, 7 or 8 of the same people. So not only are these people utilizing sheriff's office, police department resources, they're also utilizing North Central Healthcare, mental health care resources, and we've been told that they also will be using Aspirus, the ER, the paramedics, the Wausau Fire Department. So when we identify these people, we got a pretty good idea of who they are, but many of them have the same struggles.
I got Supervisor Robinson, who has indicated that his iPad has died or computer has died, so I will recognize him next and follow that by Supervisor Shrimpinski.
everything, nothing's working tonight.
Breaking everything.
Boy, you're breaking everything.
The battery died on the computer.
Hey, $6,600 you're costing us.
I'm alive. So, Chad, I had the opportunity to chair the City of Wausa's Policing Task Force, and they made, similar to your findings, a number of recommendations, including the expansion of the CART team to beyond the 8 to 5 days a week, into evenings. They called on, trying to get case management in, and they also wanted a dedicated social worker in the police department to deal with homelessness. And the other thing that they did is they talked about the mental health issues facing the officers, in the stress that they go through and making sure that we've got things. Will you comment on the importance of case management, the importance of mental health services, having some of that liaison with the homeless community, and then your own mental health programs for your officers?
Certainly. So to speak generally about the CART team, expansion of the CART team, that would be a very beneficial thing, especially here in the city of Wausau, because of the volume that our CART team is handling. We actually have members of our CART team, to kind of flash forward a little bit, they and other certain members of our office actually see counselors regularly in order to unload some of the baggage that they have based upon the work that they're doing with some incredibly challenging cases. What we see with case management is it's pretty non-existent. It really isn't there. I had previously sat on the Retained County Authority Committee as we were working through things with North Central Healthcare. I currently sit on North Central Healthcare's board, so I have a little bit of an insight into some of the things that happen. Back in the day, what we did was we tried to get 2 case managers assigned to manage court commitments. And that seemed like a good idea. Well, here's the issue. We have well over 100 court commitments at any given time, and we expect 2 people to case manage 100 high needs individuals. That's not working. That's not working. So these folks are the people that need intensive supervision. They need somebody there to help them, remind them to do simple tasks. Take a shower, make your food, brush your teeth. In many cases, that is what needs to be done. And when these folks aren't supervised and their medications aren't monitored, that's when they become a recurring problem for many folks in the community. If there was case management, I think that a lot of those challenges would be reduced. I think our officers, we've gone to great lengths to train them on mental health needs. We are running a CIT program, which is Crisis Intervention Team, where we train up to 80 officers, corrections officers, and dispatchers every year on mental health and mental illness, the resources that are available in the community. So we're trying to be proactive there. But we only have 1 dedicated crisis deputy, 1 dedicated crisis police officer at the City of Wausau, and 2 crisis workers assigned to them for all of those mental health needs in the community. And on those really deep end cases, they're the ones that take those. So what are we doing for our staff? Well, we do a number of things. We actually have a counselor that we pay. It's a private counselor that if our staff say, hey, I'm having a tough time, we've developed a rapport with this counselor, and at any given time, they can call Holly up and say, Holly, I need to talk. And that's an open door. They know where to go. We have a peer support team at the Sheriff's Office, and we've actually got a partnership with the Wausau Police Department where we can share our peer support professionals, because a deputy who's having a tough time may not want to go to a deputy within our office to share whatever that tough time is, so they can call a Wausau police officer, a peer of theirs at a different agency, and try to work through some of those challenges. And then we have the county's EAP program, Employee Assistance Program, that people can lean on as well if they were ever to need it. So we have multiple layers there, and surprisingly, more of our staff are taking advantage of that one-on-one time with Holly than I ever would have thought would have happened. I really thought that when we engaged in that agreement with her that it would be, I'm not going and talking to her. And it's been just the opposite. It's been very well received.
Okay, we have the last question, Supervisor Stravinsky.
Thank you, Chairman. One follow-up. Of these people that we're dealing with that have these serious mental health issues, and I'm going to ask you a question that you maybe can't answer, but how many of those mental health issues ultimately are the result of drug abuse or other substance abuse, at whatever historical point in their life? How many of these are, if you will, self-inflicted, not taking any judgment on that, but
I know what you're saying. I completely understand what you're asking. Almost every one of them has some sort of either co-occurring issue, which means they have a mental health issue and a substance abuse issue, or mental health issue and no substance abuse. We do have some of those folks, or they're just straight up substance abuse. But many of them, and I would say the vast majority of them, are co-occurring. And there's almost always a nexus to some sort of a substance.
Well, I want to extend my sincere thank you to the Chief Deputy for a great presentation, and thank you for that. So we'll move on. We have next with us the District Attorney, Teresa Whetstone. Teresa, please. I don't think it's on.
Did you shut that off on
there
me,
we
Chad? Oh, okay. First thing an attorney should do is check the mic, right? So I've been with the District Attorney's Office as a prosecutor since 2002 and was elected as your District Attorney in 2016. For those of you who don't know, the District Attorney's Office is solely responsible for the prosecution of all criminal actions in Marathon County, as well as responsible for juvenile delinquencies, which are crimes committed by juveniles under the age of 17. We are also responsible for state forfeitures, county traffic offenses, and county ordinance violations when those ordinances are in conformity with state law. We also are, beyond just prosecuting cases in court every day, we do a lot of collaborative efforts with other criminal justice stakeholders, and we actively participate in a lot of county initiatives. Those include the Criminal Justice Collaborating Council, the Marathon County Sexual Assault Intervention Team, the Sexual Assault Response Team, Truancy Court, the Marathon County Domestic Abuse Intervention Team, Drug Treatment Court, OWI Court, Domestic Violence Compliance Court, AOD Partnership, the North Central Wisconsin Narcotics Task Force, and of course law enforcement training and sexual assault nurse examiner training, as well as a number of panels where we go into the high schools and talk about consent and sexual assault laws to high schoolers. We do that we try to reach every freshman and or sophomore in the Wausau School District. We also partner with the women's community in providing education on sex offender registration, what that means, as well as consent and sexual assault laws. So we really try to have our prosecutors engage in things beyond just prosecution in court, but community collaboration, and work with partners and stakeholders to make sure that we are getting education to those folks, as well as having an opportunity for them to communicate with our office as well. So there are 17 law enforcement agencies in Marathon County that provide cases to our office for review and prosecution. That is pretty unprecedented in the state of Wisconsin. We are a large county, as you all know. That means there are a lot of law enforcement agencies in this county. All those referrals come into our office for review by our prosecutors to determine whether or not any kind of action will be taken on those referrals. So I will tell you that case referrals have changed a lot since when I started in 2002. So 10 of the 17 law enforcement agencies now have body cameras. They are activated in almost every investigation. And those were non-existent when I started. We literally, when I started, got a case file with some reports walked over to our office by the law enforcement agent and handed to our receptionist, and that was the case. Or faxed, yes. For the really sophisticated, we had faxes. 14 of the 17 agencies have squad cameras in their squad cars that are activated when there's an any kind of a scene. So if you think about, just think about if you're driving down the street and you see an incident on the side of the road and you see law enforcement officers, let's say the Wausau Police Department responding, and there's several officers responding, and you see those officers and they're equipped with body cameras. If that is an incident should be recorded pursuant to their policy, if you have 3 officers there, you have 3 body cameras recording that entire incident. So we even have body cameras, obviously, in traffic situations. Our prosecutors are ethically responsible to know everything that the law enforcement officer knows about that investigation. We are deemed to be one. We are to be ministers of justice. That means that if there is something in any kind of an investigation or reports that is exculpatory, meaning it actually does not show that the individual maybe committed the offense, it's not inculpatory, it's exculpatory, we're deemed to know that and to act accordingly in alignment with our ethics. So just so everyone understands, our job is not to go into court and win. Our job is to go in and be ministers of justice, whatever justice looks like in that particular case. We have tried to make advances in our office that are consistent with public safety as well as financial efficiency. As you can see highlighted in the packet is our Prelim Testifier. We are one of the few counties in the state that have done that, and in essence what it does is I think it does help law enforcement in the sense that they're not getting, if they're a night shift officer, getting called into court to testify at a preliminary hearing that may or may not happen. Those officers have other obligations in their lives, families, child care issues. They're out on another call doing an investigation if they're actively working. So that designated preliminary hearing testifier position, it's hundreds of cases every year where they are part-time positions that are law enforcement connected in their experience, and they're able to come in and testify rather than calling all these different officers in, subpoenaing each one to come in and testify. We also went paperless in 2019, and in 2020 we instituted a digital evidence transfer from law enforcement agencies where they are able to put their reports, remember I said they used to walk in and hand them to us, now they can put their information into a digital portal that we helped establish with City County IT. They were very integral in that, and we are able to have that digital transfer of that information. That also allowed us to digitally transfer all of those reports and recordings that we get. The defense attorney is entitled to those reports as well. So we open between 5,000 and 6,000 cases a year. So defense attorneys are entitled to have those reports in a timely manner as well. So we're able to use that portal actually to provide those for defense attorneys who choose to get it digitally, provide that to them in that manner, which was wonderful, especially in COVID, where there wasn't a lot of personal contact. The DA's office is required by law to retain records well after cases are closed, for years after. We are processing, for those of you who understand this lingo, I can't say I fully do, but we are processing on average of 15,000 digital media files a month in our office, approximately 1 terabyte of data. That is not including the 8,500 pages of reports that we process every month in our office. We are working to ensure we are in compliance and in concurrent with the county's record retention policies and updating those policies. And I anticipate that one of the challenges next year will be, and later this year will be, the significantly increased storage needs. We are already seeing that we're running out of room to store those files, and we're required by law to store those files. Another highlight, and we're required by law to know what those files say as well. Another highlight of the budget message was the court backlog. Talk a little bit about that, and that was sort of brought up already in the jail discussion. So COVID shut down jury trials in our courts from March of 2020 to February of 2021. Only jury trials. It did not shut down the court system. It did not shut down the DA's office. I have set as district attorney clear expectations that our staff will address cases that are received from law enforcement in at least 30 days. We have far exceeded that, and the average is 18 days for felonies from the time they come into our office to the time someone has reviewed and determined what is the next step with that case. Is it to charge, get additional investigation, or it's not able to be charged? Oftentimes it's much shorter than 18 days because they are in custody. And on average, for all cases, ordinances, misdemeanors, felonies, it's 23 days. Administrator Leonard can reflect back on a time when it was more like a year. Just to give you some perspective, it was more like a year. So we're doing well on processing. So we're getting those cases reviewed and we're getting them into the system. Unfortunately, cases are not moving through the system as fast as they're coming in. So just to give you a little perspective, this is always helpful for me to look back as well. So in 2017, for example, 1,416 felony cases were opened. Okay, opened in Marathon County, just felony cases where there's a prison potential. And at the end of the year, there were 933 still open in the system. That's 102% clearance rate. That makes sense to you all? In 2021, there were 1,648 felonies open instead of that 1,416, so a higher rate. And at the end of 2021, there are 1,680 pending at the end of the year. So in 2017, there were 933. You think about that increase. These are felony cases. These are serious cases. And we're at a 91% clearance rate. So what that means is more cases are coming into the system and getting opened and less are getting closed. So it's piling up. So the clearance rate went down 11% on felony cases, and felony cases, not the other cases, went up by 232 cases. So the DA's office is making adjustments, and we continue to do so. One of the adjustments we have done is that we have been successful in petitioning the state to get additional prosecutors. We're very grateful for that. And the state, Pat Snyder was very helpful in that. And the state is now funding 13 full-time prosecutors in our office and 2 COVID relief prosecutors. In addition to that, for 2 years, we've been able to hire 1. We are still recruiting. And now what we've been able to do with that, we've been able to assign our prosecutors to the 6 branches, so they stay in a branch for the vast majority of their time, almost all of their time, so they are available. So when the court is available, the prosecutor's available. And that was our goal, is to have assigned prosecutors in the branches. Otherwise, we have prosecutors running between branches and they can't schedule with the prosecutor because they're scheduled in a different branch. And now we've been able to assign that. So if the court is available, that means, by and large part, the prosecutor is going to be available. We also have one of the largest diversion programs in the state, which means we divert the low-level offenders pre-charge. So those cases are not even counted in these numbers because they are pre-charge. So they're not counted in all of the statistics that I was just giving you. We also do post-charging diversion. So, and we do keep track of the recidivism rate of those offenders and making sure that we're selecting the correct individuals and it's consistent with public safety, if any of you are ever interested in those statistics. Another significant change, and I don't know where I'm at with the time because I don't have a cool timer on the thing, but another significant change, that was very intimidating, by the way, is I'm glad I don't have one in trial because I would never do well with that. Another significant change in case processing is Marcy's Law. For those of you who are not familiar with Marcy's Law, it's the constitutional rights amendment for victims in Wisconsin, and it was a great step forward for victims. It was passed during the pandemic in May of 2020. This was in addition to the Wisconsin law that already existed for victims' rights. And the district attorney's office is legally responsible for ensuring that victims' rights are honored in all of these criminal cases. So we have added another branch of court. We've added prosecutors, and cases are coming in and staying in the system at a very high or higher rate, if not unprecedented rate. So what that means is in 2017, our 2 specialists and 1 victim witness coordinator were providing requested services for 1,049 victims. So when that number rose to 1,417 in 2021. So when cases fail to close in the criminal justice system, there are all kinds of ripple effects for the jail, for our office, for victims. And I'm talking about victims by numbers. If you could see the heartbreak and anguish of victims in the delays in the criminal justice system, I feel that more than ever, we have victims. It's not just about making sure they get their rights. The delay is just affecting them mentally, physically, financially. It's devastating. It's really devastating. Victims' rights compliance has to be addressed at every court hearing where there is a victim involved. And as of 2019, before this backlog increased, we had the 7th highest victim-to-staff ratio in the state. In other words, 64 other counties had a better staffing ratio than us. The state has reviewed our data and approved us for another position. So why does the state get involved in that? Just so you understand, one of the fees that's collected as part of convictions is a fee that goes to pay for the county victim witness staff. So they reimburse the county victim witness staff at a rate that is dependent upon how much of those fees they collect. So it's always be somewhere between 40 and 60%. So when we have a victim witness person in our office and they're doing designated victim witness functions, then the state will reimburse if they have approved that position at a rate of 40 to 60%. This year it was 49%. So if victims' rights are not complied with, the case does not go forward on that day. It will result in delay, and it's just not acceptable. So that is a challenge that we will face in 2023 as cases are at an unprecedented level, and then trying to get these cases through the system as quickly as possible. So our office appreciates the support of our county and the board, and we will continue to make adjustments that are not just best for our office, but that are best for the system. And that's our commitment. And I am happy to meet with any of you anytime and discuss our programs, discuss our outcome measures, discuss our process, discuss our philosophy, whatever. You certainly can contact me and reach out. I'd be happy to give you more information on any of these or other topics that you're interested in. So thank you for your time.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Supervisor Robinson has indicated that he had a question for the DA.
So how has the shortage of public defenders impacted your caseload?
If a person seeks representation and they are indigent, so just as my understanding, and I certainly would defer to the Public Defender's Office for more explanation, but my understanding is that first and foremost, the Public Defender's Office only deals with those persons who are declared indigent. That means they're at a level of poverty that is, they basically can own nothing or have anything. That is who the Public Defender's Office deals with. There are a significant number of individuals who do not meet that threshold, and the Public Defender's Office does not represent them. They either need to privately retain or have an attorney appointed through the county, which is a different process. So the Public Defender's Office can, as I understand it, defer out up to a third of their cases for whatever reason they deem appropriate, whatever that may be, to private bar attorneys. So we do have very few private bar attorneys in the area that are willing to take public defender cases. So we have people coming from Madison, Milwaukee, Appleton, to take cases here in Marathon County. It's difficult for them to communicate with their clients, especially if they're in custody. We're trying to use Zoom as much as possible. I'm very in favor of using audiovisual means whenever appropriate and effective to have it be easier for defense attorneys to facilitate court. But if they do not have public defender representation, for whatever the reason may be, the case will not proceed in any meaningful way forward. So as a system, that is an issue we are reviewing, actually. We have a meeting. I reached out to the head of the State Public Defender's Office. They actually have a board. I reached out to the head of the State Public Defender's Office, who is making a visit to Marathon County in mid-August to have a meeting with stakeholders to address what staff attorneys are taking versus private bar attorneys taking on behalf of the Public Defender's Office. What does that ratio look like? What can we do, if anything, to assist in that process to make it quicker, to make it smoother? And even though I'm a district attorney, I recognize that the importance of collaborating with the Public Defender's Office and having those conversations, because it affects the system, which affects our residents. So. Right. So for those, and there's a large subset of individuals that don't qualify for public defender, so they go before the court, and if the court finds, I'm really simplifying this, but if the court finds that the individual can't afford a retainer for an attorney, but they also don't qualify for a public defender, they are eligible for a county-appointed attorney. And what that means is that the county fronts the money for that attorney to provide services, and then the offender pays the county back. So that rate is slightly higher than the public defender's rate. So we don't have a large pool of attorneys to take those cases locally either. And because some of those attorneys who take public defender appointments are also the ones who take the private appointments or take the county appointments, there's a situation where there's financial incentive actually to have the county appointment versus the public defender.
If I could just add one thing, Mr. Chair, and then imagine it's the same list, like Teresa said. It's the same group of attorneys that'll take public defender and private bar, and we don't have enough attorneys locally to take either. The group that are getting the $100 an hour, the slightly higher than public defender rate, they're busy, so there's not enough. They don't have enough supply of time to take the public defender cases. So it is a real struggle.
And I go back to also what I talked about in the beginning. All of these cases are different than they be in 2002. So the public defender, it's not just prosecutors who review these body camera videos, squad camera videos, surveillance videos, cell phone downloads. It's the defense attorneys as well. They're obviously very responsible for reviewing those. And so the time it takes for them to properly review and meet with their client has changed as well. And then I know you talked recently with a private bar attorney who was charging what per hour? You can say, it's okay.
$5.50
per hour versus the $70 or $100 per hour that public defenders or county appointed attorneys are getting. So having said that, that doesn't mean we just throw up our hands and say, well, there's nothing we can do about this. We meet as a system regularly. We meet in our office regularly to try to pinpoint areas that we do have under our control. That accountability is a huge piece. We have a public safety assessment now that works with bond, and we have a case manager who works with, or case managers who work with people who are out on the street on bond based upon their level of risk for failure to appear, to try to get them to keep coming to court, because as you can imagine, if someone fails to appear for court, the cost to the county and the cost to victims is significant. Those cases are not moving along. So there are efforts being made at every stage of the system to try to control the things we can, but we have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do.
Supervisor Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question on, you had mentioned consent training done at the Wausau School District. Is consent training done throughout the county at Stratford, Marathon, et cetera?
Yes. Well, what I'll tell you is the women's community puts together that curriculum and has attempted and continues to attempt to get into more schools. Some have had more success than others. So I have done some of the more rural schools, but not on a regular basis. But yes, we are definitely open to doing that. It's a matter of having support or an understanding and a good collaboration with the school that gets set up. And there's a lot of mixed feelings about that topic, and as far as what should be discussed, who should be discussing it, and to what extent. So the women's community is very active in that and would gladly discuss that more in depth.
If I can add one thing, the reason that the women's community and Teresa collaborate on that, one of the reasons perhaps, is that's a contract that the county board directed administration to put in place several years ago. Through each budget, you fund various nonprofits. One of them is the women's community. And that is one specific program that was identified as an opportunity to really support the work of the district attorney's office, quite honestly. It's how can we leverage the skills and talents of the women's community along with our wonderful staff in the DA's office to hopefully keep people from coming into the justice system.
Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you. You had mentioned the diversion of low-level offenders pre-charge. You mentioned a recidivism rate, but you didn't mention the number. What is that rate?
Well, we have our wonderful diversion coordinator sitting in the back attending. I don't know if you know the rate right now, but off the top of your head. And so what we do is we look at what is the average. So recidivism rates really mean nothing unless you have what would be the recidivism rate without the intervention. You have to have something to compare it to. If you don't have anything to compare it to, then it's just a number, right? So we look at what would be the recidivism rate for low-level offenders without the program intervention, and what is it for our offenders that are going, low-level offenders who are going through that intervention. And we keep track of that to make sure that we're actually making a difference. Are our outcome measures worth the effort as well as consistent with public safety?
I see no other questions. So Teresa, and the district attorney's office, thank you so very much for a great presentation. Next, we have up the ADRC director, Michael Ray. Michael, please.
All right, good evening. Totally shifting gears here. So scroll me down. All right.
Yeah, here you can drive.
I'll drive. All right. And that is not my picture on that. That is our former executive director, Jonette Arms, who left for a position at DHS. So I am fairly new into this role. Been in this role since April, and prior to that had been with the ADRC for the past 9 years. So I do have some familiarity with the services that we provide. So ADRC, in what we do and what we are a 4-county entity. We serve Marathon, Lincoln, Langlade, and Wood counties. We are formed by the counties through an intergovernmental agreement to be able to provide the ADRC services as well as the Older American Act programs. Some familiarity of what some of those programs may be. Our Older American Act programs, the one you're probably most familiar with is our Meals on Wheels programs, but we also do offer caregiver support coordination for individuals who are a caregiver or become a caregiver. I always like to mention that people don't always choose to become a caregiver. A lot of times a family situation arises or you have a family member that now needs some support and voila, you're a caregiver. And what does that look like? And how do you make sure that you're supporting yourself? How do you make sure you're best supporting that person? We have support to be able to help educate those individuals. We also obviously have our Meals on Wheels program, which is pretty robust. And I did bring along some data. I love data. I know boards love data generally. So we do have our annual report that's on that back table, along with some Marathon County specific data as well. So just our Meals on Wheels specific program, in Marathon County alone, we served around 70,000 meals in 2021. So that is a significant amount of meals, obviously going out to several hundred different customers across the county. And when I say county, I mean every nook and cranny of Marathon County. And you know how large this is, and we're getting into all those different rural areas to be able to support people in their nutrition within their home. It's a wonderful program that not only provides nutrition, but sometimes it's the only daily contact a person has and eyes on a person to make sure that they're doing well and are being safe. Many times our drivers have come across situations where things aren't going so well, and they're able to connect to our other staff and resources to be able to make sure we get them the help they need. Our goal and our mission and the drive that we do for the agency as an ADRC is to be the one-stop shop for anything related to aging and disability. I want to highlight that disability section a little bit, because usually when you hear ADRC, the first thing that pops into your head is aging, right? Because you hear that word first, you think we're the aging people. But we also do serve adults with disabilities 18 and older. We work with the school districts to transition youth with disabilities into that adult world so that they make that successful transition. So we do a lot of work with disabilities as well. So that can be a really wide spectrum. Our goal is to keep people as healthy and as independent as possible in the setting and where they want to live. From a fiscal standpoint, it's very cost effective to keep a person within their home, utilizing their own personal resources to provide supports and services for themselves. So our staff are skilled at understanding all those resources that are available, helping them understand and understand the options and to build a plan for themselves, and to utilize those personal resources as most efficiently as possible to stretch those dollars out before they get into publicly funded programs. We are also, though, the entry point into the publicly funded programs. Family Care and IRIS are the long-term care programs. You may have heard the provider names more frequently, which is Inclusa or Lakeland. Are the big providers for family care, and then we have IRIS, which is an acronym. It stands for Include, Respect, I Self-Direct. It's a self-directed program that has 4 agencies that actually serve this region in this county. So we have a very broad spectrum of services that go from anything from calling our agency to get a telephone number to a resource, to having a person come and sit in your home around your kitchen table to talk to you about your situation, what's going on within your situation, what the options are for you to be able to have the best support for your individual situation, what that may cost, if you can't afford that, what your options are for publicly funded programs, and so on and so on. So it is a really large scope. We have a lot of responsibility. I will say that we are, as a 4-county organization that's, as an intergovernmental agreement, it is very effective and efficient. We're looked at as within the state for ADRCs as kind of the gold standard model of what an ADRC and what a regional entity should look like. We're very proud of that fact. And on our, I'll scroll down to the fiscal page, because I know, again, that's something that's really of interest here. As you see within our budget here, we do get tax levy from each of our counties. That number has been set since the inception of our organization in 2006. We took on we initially started as 2 counties, which was Marathon and Wood counties, and expanded to Lincoln and Langley counties in 2010. Our levy that we receive from counties has not increased since the inception of our organization. You may have heard the population is aging, so our customer volume has gone way up. Our cost or the revenue we're getting from our counties has stayed static. I'm not saying that that's always going to be the case, so you may see me another time coming in front of you to ask for more money, but right now at this point in time we've been able to maintain our operations very effectively. And that's really, I think, tied to that efficiencies of being a regional entity. So again, I'm the brief one here of talking about our program and all the different things that we offer. Again, there are some reports in regards to our annual report that looks at our whole organization as a whole. And you get to see a great picture of myself on the front of it. So I didn't put it there, but somebody else did. And then also look at the whole statistics for our region. But I also broke it down into Marathon County specific so you can see the impact that we have within Marathon County specifically. So with that, I would entertain any questions that anybody has.
Any questions for Michael?
I was great. Look at that.
You were so excellent, Michael. You didn't generate a single
up.
question. Thank you so very much, Michael. We will move on to review and discuss the items that will be taken up at Tuesday's meeting. Agenda items. Under item 9 is appointments. Item 9A1 is the ADRC CW board appointment. I apologize. I totally missed one agenda item, and that is our finance director, Christy Palmer, and she is going to give us an overview on the county budgeting process. Christy, my apologies.
Good evening. Budget doesn't stop, so you would have had me up here at some point this year yet. So what we're going to do tonight is just give you a really brief overview of the budget process. We did have a more extensive discussion in finance yesterday. What we're going to do is just kind of go over it. And as I told the Human Resource, Property, and Finance Committee, we used to just be the Finance Committee, so I apologize to all the other departments that report back to that committee. Usually I would come in and I do a big doom and gloom and tell you how much money I had to make up in the budget because we have all these terrible things happening. And I started building that model and decided every year is a terrible year, and every year I tell you that we're going to be short and we're going to have doom and gloom, and it's just gotten worse. So we're going to tell you that we will build you a balanced budget that we will provide to the Finance Committee and give to you to deliberate on in November. Even before COVID hit in 2018, we had a war on drugs because we had such a high number of opioid addiction problems that we took $1.6 million from our fund balance to try to alleviate that problem. Then we had COVID hit and we were short in our budget in 2020. And we stopped in the middle of the year and did a budget adjustment. And there's a plan on the county website under County Administrator that showed you the types of things we were going to do to try to cut $2 million out of the budget to try to mitigate the problems that we were seeing because of the COVID pandemic. 2021 came along and it didn't get much better. 2022 is here and we're still here. So I'm not going to go into all the details of what that's going to look like for us this year, but I will tell you through this quick overview that there are some new things that we've never seen before, and our budget issues are a little different than we've ever seen. And that's what we're going to talk about this evening. And I thank Chief Deputy Billa because the number one thing I was going to explain to you that's new is our ability to retain and hire staff. So I'm going to go on and just do our presentation. If you have any questions, you can just refer those to the chair and we can address them either as I go along or at the end there's a question slide. So the budget overview this time, it's a happy budget message usually, better than, not that the budget's better, but that we're going to just kind of talk about the things that are of concern to us. What we'll do next is go into some budget assumptions with the Human Resource, Finance, and Property Committee late July and then into August. And then we'll follow up on the last part of the slide with what your roles and responsibilities are as a board in regards to how the budget works. So with that, we're going to do a really quick overview. What should I do? There we go. this is where we aren't going to talk a lot of detailed budget assumptions, but what the issues are that we are bringing to you that are considerable concern to us, that are new to us, are two things. One is the inflation, and prior to meeting yesterday as a finance committee, the Bureau of Labor came out with new inflation numbers, and that is a 9.1% increase in inflation over previous year's numbers in June of 2021 to 2022. That number has not been seen in the United States since 1981. So if you think about that, some of the people in this room or in the county weren't born at that time. So this is something that's new to, and I'm not looking at anybody, I'm looking at the camera up here. That's new to this county, and how do we combat that, knowing that all of the people that live here and work here are struggling because those are food costs, housing costs, inflation is also your fuel and energy costs. So for us, what does that mean? That means that we're going to have a slowdown in durable goods and higher fuel costs in general. And what we look at as trends, and what we're going to show you a little bit tonight of what we look at and try to manage and try to predict how our budget's going to go, is that we rely on sales tax for our revenues that we are generating in the county. So we're going to look at a chart on sales tax. And then on expenditure side, it's the fuel, gas, and utilities side of our budget. So that's something that we're really looking at because we're very sensitive to that. And that's something that we don't places that much importance on. Not that it isn't important, but it definitely has become a issue that we need to be aware of and manage and track throughout the budget process. The next one, and I'm glad that Chief Deputy Billup was up before me, is our employee retention and recruitment. We are at an all-time high of turnover with the majority of the employees that leave say they're leaving due to wage and benefits. One of the things that hasn't changed is benefit costs, the rising cost of insurance. And one of the things that we've talked about for years, and this is one of the things that we watch and monitor, is that our health insurance costs exceed the increase that we receive in net new construction. And we'll talk in a few slides about why that's so important to us. Lastly is what we're going to ask from you is that we would need flexibility and the ability to re-engineer this organization because it's critical in us being able to navigate these new issues. And they're more fast changing. As I said, opioid in 2018, COVID, now we're possibly experiencing a recession, and we do have increased inflation. The way that we were able to manage out of some of those other crises is by being able to be flexible and coming up with ways to mitigate those, or watching trends to make sure if we made some changes that we were able to pull ourselves out of that issue, or at least mitigate it so that it's not the number one thing that we're trying to do is manage a crisis. We're trying to provide services and get our jobs done. So that's what we're looking at on that one. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what makes a budget, county budget. We're going to hear about our levy limits. Just took the statute. Local levy limits are in place. They've been in place since 1993. There have been several iterations of those through which we have to maintain an operating tax levy of a certain limit. We cannot go over that limit. There are two, so we call it a levy limit. You'll hear us probably just say the levy limit, but it actually is two pieces. There is an operating levy limit and a debt levy limit. And we have to be mindful of the rules that are accompanying both of those sides of it. And what it is you can't exceed last year's levy except for a valuation factor. And on the bottom, that valuation factor is the percentage in January 1st is equalized value due to net new construction, which is the amount of things you build less the amount of value of things you tear down. So that's simply what it is. And that's why net new construction is very, very important to us, because for your operating levy, it is the only increase that we can take, barring a few other items, but in general, is the amount of net new construction. And you take the operating levy from 2022, and you can multiply it by the increase in net new construction, and that's what your number will be for 2023. Debt has its own set of rules, but this is where most of your levy is going to be listed. There are a few exceptions, it says, in 3E, so let's see what those are. 3 of these may be part of what we have to worry about, or we have exceptions to that levy limit. One of them is the amount of levy the amount of levy a county can levy for Children with Disabilities Education Board. We do have one, but it is levy neutral to us at this time, and it always has been since I've been working here. But that is one item that you can levy, and it would be outside of that levy cap. The number 2 does not apply to us. That's for cities of first-class cities, and that's based on population. I believe it's either 450 or 500,000, which does include City of Milwaukee, and it may also include at this time City of Madison. Doesn't apply to us. Number 3 does apply to us. The amount of levy that you have for bridge and culvert construction and repair, and we do levy a culvert and bridge aid, we call it, and you'll get a resolution in September to approve that. We incorporate within our 2023 budget on the levy for those municipalities that participate in bridge and culvert aid. Not every one of them do. Towns are required to, and some of the villages and cities of Marathon County have also chose to participate in county bridge aid. The last one is the amount of county levy that we have to make payments to libraries, and so that's the library county tax levy as well. That's how we put together that, and that's why we find that county levy limits are very important, and they're one thing that we are going to track and we estimate so that we get ready for that. The next item I'm just going to talk about is the tax levy and the tax rate, and you can see this chart is in your 2022 budget, which again is on our website, but you see that the levy has gone up, but the tax rate goes down, and you're thinking, well, that's kind of odd. One goes up, one goes down. What's going on here? It's basically a function of the math that's included in how you calculate that. The tax levy is based on the increase in the net new construction, and the bottom denominator of a tax rate is the equalized value of the entire county. So on the next worksheet, the only reason I have that in there is to show you the math that is included to calculate that. So you see that one of the assumptions that we'll be bringing is what we believe net new construction will be, so that we can start to design our budget. And so over the last 8 years, net new construction on average has gone up a little under 1.7%, whereas the equalized value that we can use, which is equalized value less TID value, has gone up 3.44% over the course of the last 8 years. So your top number has the ability to increase at a lower rate than your bottom number. So that's why there's a large difference in the tax rate, because as the top number gets proportionately smaller in increase than the bottom number, it allows that tax rate to be dropped, just simply do the math. And the only reason I have this sheet on here, you see that I'm trying to calculate the operating and special and debt. That's not actually the estimates. I'm just doing a flat estimate of what the net new construction would be and how that would impact us in the budget. On August 15th, the state of Wisconsin provides us that information, so we have a clear picture of where we can go. So we put an estimate in there to just get a placeholder, and then we'll be using that to help us move forward with the budget. Yep, I have that on here. The last 8 years net new construction is 1.66%. The equalized value for county apportionment is 3.44. So you can see right there between the two, top one is increasing at a much slower pace than the bottom number in that.
So what does that equate to?
Yeah, it's around, just a ballpark, it is like $1 million. So every $1 million adds to the levy. But we'll get into that more later. I'm trying not to use a lot of numbers on this one just to get everybody's head wrapped around it tonight. So this one is out of the 2022 budget book too. All it does is the pie chart on the left with a lot of blue in it is where's the money coming from? And the pie chart with all kinds of colors, lots of brown and yellows, is where the money is spent. Proportionately, if you take a look at this in your budget book, proportionately, this is pretty much the proportions for the budget in every year, so it's not going to change or fluctuate that much unless there's a substantial amount that's in capital or a substantial change in a revenue source, because when we start to hit with ARPA, we haven't used a lot of it, so it's a deferred revenue right now. So when ARPA grants hit, you'll see a higher proportion in the intergovernmental grants in that part of the pie chart. But about 36%, or a little over a third of our total revenue budget, comes for taxes. That's a portion is property tax, sales tax, and other taxes like forest crop and that sort of item. This is the one that we're talking about, we watch because of inflation, and this one is showing you that sales tax has been growing, and it grew a lot last year, and you can see that by the chart on the bottom. But we are now seeing a very small margin on a monthly basis of how high the sales tax is per month. It is last year, as of June of last year, compared to how much we collected as of June of this year, there's only a 0.4% increase, which, as you'll take a look at that chart, is starting to come down. So we're very concerned that we are not going to see an increase in sales tax over the course of this year, and possibly even a decrease over last year's. And again, the slowdown of durable goods sales, the inflation, the ability for stores to have more inventory and not selling it as fast are concerns to us. So this is something we would watch as an indicator. And when we put that assumption together, we'll probably make it more conservative than we would have in past years. Again, one of the other items, and this is why we're showing you this tonight, is just to see these trends. They're going to help build our budget. They're different than before. One of the things that Molly had mentioned in this one is that our year-over-year increase in attrition rate, which is the amount of employees that are leaving, is 56%. Of that, the people that leave for this year alone, 28% of the employees that have left employment with us were here less than 1 year. And that's something that I don't think we've ever had before. This is really a place that has been a family to most of us, and most of us stay here for our whole career. And even some of us, like myself, leave, we come back. It's a really nice place to work. So it's a little shocking to us, especially those of us that have worked here for a long time, to see that type of attrition. So it's something that we're really concerned about, because we need to have the right employers to do the jobs to get things done. So that has actually been kind of a shock to some of us that have worked here for quite a bit. And I think it was reiterated in the Chief Deputy's message as well. Again, the Sheriff's Department, when he was saying that's it, this chart...
Christy, could you go back to that last screen for just a second? One of the points I think, though, that it has to be made is on the exit interviews that 58% of those people that are leaving because of salary and pay. And that's critical. I think that this board needs to understand that's why we're doing a pay compensation study, because if we're losing 58% of the people that are leaving this job in Marathon County and seeking other employment are seeking it because of pay and not other reasons. Thank you, Chris.
This just shows the data annualized year over year, and that's where the sheriff has had a substantial increase in people leaving the department. With that, that's kind of just the highlights, some of the things that we watch, some of the things we're concerned about that are new. This is what we're going to talk about before I wrap this up. What's happening is we're putting those actual detailed assumptions together. These are the new things that we're watching, or things that we've watched but we're a little more concerned about than in previous years. We wait till our numbers come out from the Department of Revenue so that we can really kind of concentrate our efforts on getting that budget put together. And what happens now is that the county administrator will take that budget and he'll meet with all the departments and we'll put a budget together. And that gets handed off to the Human Resource Finance and Property Committee. They'll be meeting on October 3rd. Usually what they do is it's like getting a car. You went to the showroom and if you have a car, if there are any cars at the showroom, you drive it over there to them and they kick the tires and they look under the hood and they ask a few questions and you go home, you think about it. And then on October 12th, they're going to come back and hopefully review and approve the 2023 county administrator budget. So what it does, it gets handed from one group to the next group. So county administrator budget to finance committee budget. And we need to have a budget approved by October 17th because it needs to be published 15 days prior to the public hearing that happens. So the finance committee gets the budget in October. They are going to drive it around, test drive it. They may move a few things around in it. They'll do whatever they need to get that, to make it a budget that they accept and can move forward. The county board then gets it, so November is your month for taking a look at that budget. November 3rd, there's a public hearing where people can speak in regards to that budget, and you can discuss it. And then on November 10th, you as a county board will approve a 2023 budget. That is the end. So if you have any questions, otherwise we will be seeing you with more detailed information, but we thought that was just a nice way of giving you our hopes and fears for our next budget sessions.
Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you, and thank you, Christy, for that overview. Just a couple of things. If you notice, we've got a $199 million budget. $53 million of that comes through the levy. There are some areas where we've been relatively flat in our terms of growth. One is general transportation aid, or state aid for our roads, and that's based upon a 6-year rolling average. The infrastructure committee is looking at a 2050 plan to try to look at ways that we could accelerate our payments from the state and get more money back. In the past, the first thing cut with tight budgets was highway funding, and that's had a up and down impact on us, and we've remained flat even though the state transportation aids have gone up, so we need to be smarter in that area. We've also had relatively flat shared revenues, or money coming back from the state through shared revenues and utility payments. So it shifts the burden to fees and other things. The two things that Christy didn't cover specifically in this that we will also be incorporated into the budget process will be new positions. And there's a process by which we evaluate those and prioritize those, and those will be included as part of the budget. And as part of and sort of separate to the budget is our capital improvement plan, which is we're working toward a 5-year capital improvement plan. In the past, the county did not do a very good job of maintaining our buildings, and we're still playing some catch up with some of that. But you will have an opportunity to view a preliminary capital improvement plan and then ultimately finalize that plan as part of the budget. So we'll be keeping you apprised of those efforts.
Next, we have Supervisor Dickinson.
So going back to that chart where you had the 58% that we're leaving for wages, I think it's important to point out that that's not a singular reason, because if you start adding up the other reasons in there, they're well over 100%. So that would be one of multiple reasons, which, I think, although it's the number one, it's the highest, there are other reasons in there like flexibility at 42% and advancement opportunities that are at 19%. Workload at 33%. I think if you have 10% or whatever the number is, less than 100% of your staff, then of course that's going to move the work around.
Supervisor Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a great point. And I think that's one of the things when Christy had up initially about flexibility in the budget. You will hear from us, and you'll see it in the budget message, just to your point, Supervisor Dickinson. We need to think differently than we have in the past. And you'll see this around the state of Wisconsin. Those numbers for local governments, we are not, I got good news and bad news. We are not unique. I guess that's both good and bad. So we need to start doing some innovative things. And one of the things that I've talked with at HR Finance, and it's alluded to in my annual update to the budget, we're looking at a lot of ways to impact both sides. The financial side with projects like our Workday implementation, projects like our health insurance reevaluation, our class comp study, but also trying to get at that flexibility that Supervisor Dickinson is referencing. I referenced in my annual update, and it was just presented to executive today, so please take a look at it, that we are really trying to lean in to the hybrid work environment. We are looking for flexible options for employees because we have to. Every business has to at this point. And I'm very proud of Vicky's here for a different reason, but you'll see that in my annual update. We are relocating the social services department to the Lakeview Drive campus adjacent to North Central Healthcare. And one of the things I challenged Vicky with, I think it was in like 2018 or 2019, was start thinking about how to design more of a hybrid consolidated footprint, and better lucky than good. She was working on it before COVID, which is great because then we learned a lot more, and we designed a facility, and Vicky's going to be moving her team to it, that is less than 70% of the footprint of the current facility. So again, it's really leaning into how do we provide the flexibility that staff are looking for. Two of my colleagues in other counties that I talk to on a weekly basis just went to 4.5-day work weeks. Their county boards approved that. I'm not saying that's necessarily the right thing for us, but how do we make sure that we address not just one, because as the chief deputy referenced, relative to corrections recruitment, we did increase the rate we were paying for people to come in. That didn't solve the problem. We need to start looking at, again, new and innovative ways. So I think Supervisor Dickinson's point is exactly, it's spot on, and we're going to try to address that through the budget process.
Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Chairman. I realize that we do have a very, very difficult situation, but I think going forward as we look at the budget, it's incumbent upon all of us to realize that our constituents, our taxpayers, have a much more difficult situation. They are seeing realistically, numbers came out, 9.1% inflation. We can argue whether that really is more like 10, 12, 15%, depending on what numbers you want to look at. That is money they don't have to spend at the county level. So we have to look at that, and we have to be willing to tighten the county budget to the point where it hurts, because that is exactly where our constituents are at. They're taking a 10% hit. We have to be willing to do the same.
Any other discussion? Okay, now we will move on to to review and discuss Tuesday meeting agenda items. And under items 9A1 is the ADRC CW board appointment of Michael Ferrier. Any questions? Okay, we will move on to ordinances from the Environmental Resources Committee. We have the town, item 9B1, Town of Elderon Rezone, Ordinance 16-22. Also the rezone. Okay. Not a problem. Any questions on that item? Moving on to item 9B2, Town of Reed rezone, Ordinance 17-22. Any questions on that rezone? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Items 3 and 4 are both from the same petitioner. Same land owner, two different parcels and two different rezones. Item 9B3, Town of Rib Falls rezone, Ordinance 18-22. Any questions on that one? And the second one from the landowner is from the Town of Rib Falls, Ordinance 19-22. Any questions on that one? And going on to item 9B5, Town of Spencer rezone, Ordinance 20-22. Any questions on that rezone? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to resolutions. Under 9C, we have 9C, Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee. Under 9C, 1A, approve the 2022 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations, Resolution 43-22. Any questions on that resolution? Okay, next we have item 9B, 9C 1B, and that is to amend the 2022 budget to accept the grant funds for the Family Keys pilot project. And we have with us the Social Services Director, Vicki Tilka, and she's going to give us a presentation. And the Health and Human Services Chair, Michelle Van Cray, is going to start us off with the presentation.
All right, thank you, Chair Gibbs, for the opportunity to share again with the board about the Family Keys grant this evening. As you all are aware, the Social Services Department of Marathon County has been invited to participate in a project with the State Department of Children and Families. This project has two distinct phases, and tonight for Tuesday, we are asking you to support Phase 1, which is a significant grant to assist child welfare families with housing right now. Phase 2 later on will offer us more opportunities, such as working with outside organizations, but that's only if we decide and agree to work in Phase 1. The Family Keys project has been designed to learn about ways we can improve access to safe and adequate housing for families who are in our county's child welfare system, and then replicate what works well across the state. It is the legal obligation of the child welfare system to support parents in caring for their children, and when placed outside of the home, to make every effort to reunify with the parents. The presentation tonight will provide a high-level review of the mandate that the county has to provide child protective services, the costs associated, and the value of this grant opportunity before us. And I believe we have Judge Corbett here.
No, Judge Corbett asked me to apologize to the board. He was called away on a family emergency, and so Michael Pierner is going to provide some information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Chair Gibbs indicated, Judge Corbett was scheduled to present to the board this evening. He did have to attend to a personal matter. Because I now seem to have made a career out of providing poor Scott Corbett impersonations, I was asked to fill in for him, so I apologize in advance that I'm not Scott Corbett. But I'm going to provide you just a brief legal perspective on child protection, as well as the county's related legal requirements. As you might recall, last month we discussed a little bit about what my office does, the Office of Corporation Counsel. One of the roles that I do is we have the statutory role as the assigned prosecutors of the child protection cases that our county brings. Those are the CHIPS cases that you sometimes hear. Those are cases that are brought under the Children's Code, Chapter 48 of the Wisconsin statutes. Those statutes are also accompanied by certain administrative rules that were also developed by the state, and those apply to the provision of child welfare services by counties. Both the Children's Code in the statutes and those administrative regulations create a child protection system that is to be administered in each county in the state of Wisconsin. So in Marathon County, of course, our Department of Social Services is the arm of the county tasked by state law to provide those services. Those services include investigating child maltreatment reports, petitioning for court orders to protect children who are found in need of protection by a judge, providing placement for children who are found that they have to be removed from their families, and placing those children in out-of-home care. Our department also provides services to children and families who were reunified after a removal occurs. And the department is tasked with seeking permanency for children who are in need of protection. If you read the Children's Code, it actually starts out by indicating what the legislature says is the overarching goal of that Children's Code. It says the paramount consideration under the Children's Code is the best interest of the child. So that's always, when we go into court on a CHIPS case, that is the first and primary thing in the mind of the judge and the prosecutor and the department. The Children's Code also follows by stating that the goals of the code include preserving the unity of the family by strengthening family life through assisting parents in fulfilling their responsibilities as parents. So these are guidelines that the state has laid down in Chapter 48 regarding the services that our Department of Social Services has to provide. When our department and our social workers are handling these cases, and they can be really difficult cases when they get to the court system, the staff screens and investigates reports of child maltreatment. In 2021, as this slide indicates, there were 1,592 reports of child maltreatment that were made in the county. 516 of those cases were screened in, which means 516 cases met the legal requirements for further assessment by social workers. Once that assessment is completed, petitions are brought to the court if there is court jurisdiction. That means that a child has to be found in need of legal protection due to meeting one of the standards under Chapter 48. Most often those standards include neglect, which is defined under the statute as a parent neglecting, refusing, or being unable to provide necessary care, food, clothing, medical, dental care, or shelter so as to seriously endanger the child's physical health. Other grounds that we see in Marathon County are abuse, including physical and sexual abuse. Just to give you an idea of how many get to that point where we file court petitions, in 2021 we filed 128 of those separate court petitions, and that's been pretty consistent across the last few years. Child maltreatment gets reported to social services by a number of different people. Law enforcement and teachers, I would say, are the most common reporters, but there are many mandatory reporters and a lot of people who report even though they're not required to do so. And every time a child is determined to be unsafe, the Department of Social Services is tasked and is required by law to respond to ensure safety. Chapter 48, the Children's Code, has a specific and strict framework of hearings that have to be held within relatively fast time periods. If you look at federal and state law, they actually require that first the department and the courts look at in-home efforts. If safety can't be assured, that's when the child has to be removed from the home. And those are all things that a court will review. Anytime a child is being removed from a home, a court is involved reviewing that decision. The law actually requires, both state and federal law, that reunification be pursued and that the department make reasonable efforts to provide services to the parents to work towards that goal. And that's both under federal law, like the Family First Act that you've heard about, as well as state law, which requires preserving the unity of the family whenever it's possible and safe. Even when children are placed in out-of-home care, there is still a part of the court system that continues to monitor those cases. And the goal of that is to identify what services are being provided to get that child home or to otherwise get that child to permanency. So the courts are always reviewing those cases. The local court system has really been working for several years to identify barriers to getting children to permanency. One of those barriers is delays in getting children reunified with their parents. We actually have a local team that's led by one of our judges, Judge Jacobson. It's called the Judicial Engagement Team. It's actually identified as one of its primary goals, faster reunification with parents when that reunification is appropriate. So when we go through the court process, the court will actually issue a court order that requires a parent to meet certain conditions, and those conditions have to be met by the parent to return the child to their care. Conditions are always tailored to the facts of the case. So if it's a neglect case that involved use of controlled substances, there will be specific conditions that the parents has to meet before a child can be returned to the parent's care. And that same court order also puts requirements on the department. The department has to assist the parent in reunifying and meeting those conditions. From my perspective, again, my office is the prosecutor on these cases. If a court finds that the department hasn't made those efforts, we could be precluded in the future from finding other forms of permanency for that child, such as adoption or guardianship. The court really looks at what services the department provided. At this point, I'm sure Judge Corbett would have spoken about the effect on the system from the court's perspective. I can't bring you that judicial perspective, but I can provide you the perspective from the prosecuting agency, which is that there are significant benefits to an increased focus on services aimed at reunification, Those benefits include reduced court and attorney time, reduced out-of-home care costs, and reduced time in the system for children. So with that, I think Christy's next.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Chair Gibbs, for having me tonight. My name is Christy Keel, and I have been on the board for social services for the past 5 years and have been the chair for the past 2 years. My practice, I am an attorney, and for 15 years I represented kids in foster care, so that's my experience. So I was a guardian ad litem on those cases and had great experience in a previous county, but also here in Marathon County for 5 years. I'm going to speak a little bit about our placement plans and when a child, as Michael stated, is placed in out-of-home care. So when it's deemed that they are not safe within the home, there are four different types of care going from least restrictive to most restrictive. And we always try to have a child in the least restrictive placement, which would be beginning with relative placement. So that's the first place we look if they cannot stay in the home. After that, they would go into a non-relative foster home. Then we look at group home if that's required for behavior concerns or something other similar to that or medical needs. And then finally, the most restrictive type of placement that we have is residential treatment. So you'll note that these types of placements, obviously the least to most restrictive is also least to most costly. So, and also for the child's best interest, being in the least restrictive setting of the home versus relative all the way up to group and residential is more beneficial to them. In 2022, the budget for out-of-home care in Marathon County was just over $5 million. And this funding for child welfare cases and out-of-home care placements is a shared funding between the state DCF, Department of Children and Families, as well as the county levy. And since I've been on the board, I know we've done a great job, and Vicki and her team has done a great job of reducing or maximizing the state and federal match to the county levy, and we've reduced that to 40%. So at this last year, 60% is state and federal funding and 40% county levy. If the expenses exceed the state allocation, then the county levy would have to be the required funding source, because these are mandated services that we have to provide. So in 2018, there was bipartisan legislation at the federal level called Family First Prevention Services. And this looked at the main reason, seeing that research shows that when a child is removed from a home, that is a trauma. Obviously, there are circumstances where it cannot be avoided, but it also can be it is a trauma to have them removed from the biological parent's home. So since that time, we've been challenged as a county, as a state, to look for alternative ways. More money is going into prevention and intervention and safety services within the home. And so this is something that we all are looking at. Otherwise, our out-of-home care placement, like I just spoke to you about, that money, that's decreasing. We're getting less and less funding for that. So if we don't look at other alternative ways of placing children back with their families or keeping them in those families, then those costs would go up for the county. So this Family First is a result in, hold on one second. Oh, okay, sorry. So the state and child welfare agencies are finding new ways to adapt to this requirement. And all of the states are looking at new programs. And that's what, as you heard earlier tonight, from Representative Snyder, that's something that Wisconsin's been a little bit late to, but we are now looking at those programs. And one thing that we have found in the state of Wisconsin, especially in Marathon County, that one of the main barriers to that reunification process is often housing. And that's once everything else is completed, but housing is the barrier. So that's where we come to Family Keys. This is the exciting opportunity. Marathon County was asked to be one out of three counties, one out of three to look at this program, to begin this program, but out of 72 counties. That's remarkable. We were invited to participate in this multi-year project to address the housing barrier in child welfare cases. And there's two phases to this project, but you are just being asked to look and approve phase one of the project. So the target population in Family Keys would be those child welfare families who have successfully met all of their court-ordered requirements. So as Michael briefly told you, there's going to be a court order that every family gets, and every single family court order says that they have to have housing. So that is going to be on every single court order. So that's always going to be something that they're going to have. And so these are those families that have met everything else but for housing, have not reunified with their families. So safety has been addressed. They've already completed drug treatment if that was something that they were doing, and visitation has been ongoing, but the only thing that's the continued barrier is housing. So our vision of success is that adequate and safe housing would be available to all families, so that lack of housing would never be the barrier for returning children back to their families and to their parents. So the three main goals, the first goal is to lead the demonstration project with 2 other counties with the support of Department of Children and Family Services. Second, to address the barrier of housing for children living with their parents who are under the jurisdiction of child welfare. And finally, to learn if we can have a savings from finding less out-of-home care placement days within the county. And that is what we'll be looking at in phase one. So the phase one is the 3 counties that I spoke about. They were asked to develop a program for their county to address their immediate needs. And so in Marathon County, there was a group of individuals, you'll see in a minute, that are our partners, private and public, that came together, sat down, and brainstormed as to what is the need right now, what is the barrier right now to reunifying these families, and that was housing. And that is how we developed the Family Keys project. Phase 2 would be the duration of the whole project until 2025, and that would be a whole different thing, but we cannot move on to phase 2 if we do not accept the funds and move into phase 1. So the project looks at, and you've got a very detailed plan in your packets, so I'll just briefly say it would be a transitional housing unit for child welfare families that have completed all of their other court-ordered requirements. We anticipate that families would only be residing there for 3 to 9 months. Once the children are placed back in their home, so once they would be placed in this home, the court order always extends for a year and sometimes even longer and follows them, and they receive services and continued support through that time. And once before the court order would be done, we anticipate that they would certainly have moved into their own housing unit that they've obtained at the end of that time. It would be a $327,100 grant for the two-year grant, include rent, utilities, and furnishings for when they're in this transitional housing, and would also pay for case management to be there and to be supported. There will also be other, there's many other agencies that come into visit the families as well, but there would be a case management person there from Department of Social Services. And these families would gain experience in successful tenancy. So I think one of the biggest barriers that we find is not only having housing that's safe or affordable, but also looking at families having a successful tenancy, as having references in the past, not having successful credit, and not having other barriers that have led them to this place where it's difficult for them to find housing. And here are a list of our partners currently. In phase one, these are the partners that came together. You know, you'll see several people from private and public entities. And in phase two, then we would be looking to as many other partners that are out there, other nonprofits. I know like Hager House spoke about briefly tonight. I mean, any other partners that come forward that have the opportunity to help support this and to help support children being placed back in their homes. They would definitely be invited to come to phase two of the project. So just in summary, as a guardian ad litem, but also as the chair of the Department of Social Service Board, I would recommend that the board move forward and approve this this grant that came in for this Family Keys project. First of all, it's a trauma-informed perspective. It's best for the children to either remain in the home or when placed out of the home to be returned back to the parents once deemed appropriate and safe as soon as that is possible. Additionally, it allows us to look at the funding. The funding is shifting from out-of-home placement into intervention and prevention, and so we need to look forward into that to reduce our legal obligation as a county and share that funding source. And then finally, we have the opportunity to learn what works best to reduce this out-of-home care placement money and to do it with the grant and not county levy. So I'll look to Chair from.
Thank you, Christy. So I just want to touch on the return on investment. We just heard that we are moving into a difficult budget season again. So let's talk about the money for this. It is estimated that up to 8 children can reside in the home with their parents at a time. So based on the calculations from the state database for child welfare, if the home was full all year, the annual savings would be around $84,000, or for the term of this phase one, it'd be $168,444. And that's for the savings for the foster care placement costs. In addition to those foster care savings, we're going to see savings for our social work time of travel and less mileage, since this property will be more centrally located. And then there will also be significant but hard to calculate savings in our legal partners' court time when we can close those cases earlier. The long-term savings to the child welfare system will be analyzed throughout the project, so we will be able to see what this looks like for a longer-term basis. And then lastly, but in my opinion, most importantly, it's going to be the reduction of trauma caused by family separation. That's impossible to measure in terms of money. That's heart. That's our children, the trauma that they're going through being removed from their families. And if we look to Objective 3.3 of our strategic plan, reducing trauma to children is one of the major strategies, and one of the outcome measures is reduced out-of-home placement. So this grant can reduce both the length of out-of-home placements and reduce the barrier of adequate housing for several Marathon County families right now. I'm having a hard time understanding why we would not support this. So I'd like to urge the board to accept the Family Keys grant on Tuesday, because it is a good thing for families and children, and it will save us tax dollars in the short term and potentially on the long term. And just to provide kind of another brief overview back to this slide here. Going over the grant one more time, it's a $327,100 grant to operate transitional housing unit, which will be for 3 to 4 welfare families at a time. This housing is temporary and will only be used for parents who are evaluated to be safe to care for their children with additional supports. So they have completed all of those things from the court order. The only thing they are lacking is housing. This will provide them with a safe residence and case management services to help them find longer-term housing and be successful in that area of their life. And before we take any questions tonight, I'd like to invite Vicki up to cover anything we might have missed. Thank you.
Thank you. What I want to really focus on is this is a demonstration project, and it is about learning what works. What I want to clarify is what we are going to learn what works is if we are able to save dollars, if we're able to save out-of-home care dollars, and how much we would have to reinvest in order to do that. we're also going to look at and learn from if we are able to be successful in getting families permanent housing. Those are the pieces we're going to learn from. We're not going to learn about child safety, or we're not going to experiment with child safety. We are experts in child safety. And I really have been impressed with the number of questions that I've received from the community and county board of supervisors about child safety as a whole, because it's impressive to me that people care about children. I've dedicated my entire life, I would say career, but I'm going to say life, to child safety. My daughter, if she was here, she would tell you that ever since she was a little girl, she'd always say, "Mom, why are you the one?" So when we would go any place public, like in the zoo, I would always be, and I'm still like this, I'm watching for any child who's not supervised, who might be out of place, who might be in trouble, and that child, I'm going to come to that child, or that child's going to find me, and I'm going to find that child their mother. And my daughter would always say that, "Why is it always you, Mom?" So that's my personal commitment to safety. In terms of professional, I am on my second term of being the chair of the Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Board, which is a state board required by statute. So I tell you that because it is my professional commitment to child protective services and prevention of child abuse, and to respond to it when it does occur. And I lead a team of people who have extensive experience and are very dedicated to child protective services. In our upper management team, we have 109 years of experience with 5 members of our management team. I lead that number with 35 years of experience, and our least senior person has 10 years. And I think that's really important for us to reflect on, because that's our team from the Department of Social Services that is providing their expertise in terms of creating this plan. In addition, we only hire certified social workers who have obviously a college degree, many have an advanced degree, and then all receive extensive training in child protective services focus with safety. They take lots of courses as required, and then on an ongoing basis. We're also required to follow the standards that the Department of Children and Families have in place in order to ensure safety. It's what we do. It's our calling. We do it every day. So I would just like to say that when we, in terms of doing it every day, our social workers are going out into homes every day, assuring safety now. They're also on call at night, assuring safety now, often working with law enforcement, especially overnight. But what they do is, in terms of ensuring safety, they are observing parent-child interactions, verbal and nonverbal. They're observing physical environments. They're interviewing all family members, including talking with children alone on an ongoing basis with those they work with. And then they're also verifying information with other people who know the family, such as teachers, therapists, medical people, family members, that type of thing, so they can get other information as well, not necessarily taking everything that families will tell us at face value, but we need to get verification often. And then, of course, we're responsible to monitor the court-ordered conditions, which is, again, the requirement of ensuring that we provide for safety. It's our legal obligation. We take it seriously. It's why we exist, and we do it every day. So doing this in this environment of our transitional housing would be no different. It's what we do every day. And I need to tell you something, because when people ask me about safety, I say this: we can never 100% guarantee safety of a child. None of us can 100% guarantee safety of anyone, even yourself. Not your child, not your parent, not anyone. We could walk out in the parking lot tonight and something would happen. Driving to work tomorrow, something could happen to us. Something could happen in your home. You can never 100% guarantee. But what you can do is mitigate risks. And that's what we do, just like you do in your home. You lock your doors. You have porch lights on. Those kinds of things. You don't walk down a dark alley. We do those things with children. We have ways to mitigate risks that we have learned and that we put forth with our years of experience and training and education. And so I also want to emphasize that in terms of the team that we're working with who put together this project proposal, we've also received approval from the Department of Children and Families. And that is really significant. The Department of Children and Families is the child welfare agency for the state. So they are the agent of the federal government to ensure child safety for the state of Wisconsin. And with their oversight, they are saying that this plan is safe. We heard earlier this evening from Deputy Chief Barnes that from his law enforcement perspective and talking with other jurisdictions, that their evaluation and vetting it is that this situation is safe. But to help you understand a little bit more what we'll have in place, because I understand you don't do this every day like we do, these are some of the things that I want to emphasize that we will have in place to ensure child safety. Families who are eligible are going to be ones that we select. They are open with us for services. We know these families. They have progressed to a point of a professional assessment showing that they are safe to caretake for their children. So they have followed all of the court-ordered requirements in order to get to that spot. And they're only going to be eligible and invited to participate in that housing if we are deeming that they are appropriate to do so. They would voluntarily live in this setting as a way to get their children home, because again, this would be their last barrier from having their children to be reunited with them. They would sign an agreement of what the rules they would need to follow and the guidelines. We're in the process of creating an extensive guideline handbook to make it clear what the rules are. For example, there will be no visitors in general. There could be an exception for a visitor if there is a good reason for that. All visitors would have to pass a background check. There are locks on the doors so that people have privacy and security. We will have a camera on the external entrance, exit of the home to be able to make sure we can monitor in real time who's coming into the home and who's leaving, that type of thing. And we also, our social workers will continue to provide case management to the families like they are now. These families could be living in their own home and they would be seeing our staff a lot less than they're going to be seeing them in this home together. That's a really important distinction. So they will actually be getting more supervision, more oversight, and more support in this setting than they would if they were living separately. And also we will have additional staff at the site. Our family support specialist will be there providing a number of different services, as well as contract agencies that we work with that provide services for our families now. There are offices in this building that our staff will be able to spend time in and work, as well as our community partners will be able to come and use those offices as well. It's really an ideal location. Is it possible that we're going to observe a safety concern and have to adjust or have to respond to it? Of course it is, just like in our day-to-day work in every family that we work with. And we will do that and we will adjust. In the most serious type situation, if somebody is not following a guideline that has a poor outcome or that potentially will have a poor outcome, they will have to leave. And depending on what it is, and we have the authority to do that, and depending on what that is, as Corporation Counsel had alluded to, it might even be a situation where we would be taking the child back into custody. So again, that is what our role is. That is what we do. That's our authority and our responsibility. It would be no different in this setting than it would be anywhere else. One thing I do want to emphasize is that the parents who would be eligible and invited to live in this setting will be extremely happy to be in this setting, because it will be the way for them to get their children back to live with them, because they do not have another safe and adequate housing place for them to be. So they are going to be there. They are going to be at the table saying, what is it that I need to do to be successful here? Those are the kinds of families that we're going to be having living there. I'm not saying there's never going to be a problem there, but I'm going to say people are going to be highly motivated to make it work, because they know what the alternative is. They had their children removed from them before, and that is not something they're going to ever want to have happen again. So they will be motivated. The other thing I really feel I need to say from a trauma-informed lens is these people are not bad people, and they're not bad parents. They're people that very likely had things bad happen to them in their life that has now impacted their ability to parent. And so the law says that the child welfare agency from the county is mandated to provide those services. And I would say it's the moral and ethical thing for us to do as well. So these are the types of families that we're talking about. So the state of the Department of Children and Families and Marathon County as a whole has to have confidence in our safety decision-making every single day, because we're doing it every single day, all day long, with our social workers and our management staff that has over 100 years of experience in child protective services. So what I'm going to ask you is that you have confidence in our ability to set this program up in a safe way and monitor it safely as well. Thank you.
Okay, open it up for questions. Supervisor Marash.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. And thank you, Vicki and Administrator Leonard, for answering all of my questions all week long, because I've had many. So you have the families already picked that you want to put in the program. So what I'm wondering at this point is, will you be transitioning them in one at a time? Will the parents be going first and then the kids be introduced later, or what does that all look like?
That's a great question. And what I really hope you'll understand is we don't have every detail worked out yet, because we haven't even been able to accept the grant, right? And so we've worked and planned some, but we have not completed all the pieces because we haven't been able to accept the grant. So having said that, what our thought process would be is that we don't have exact families picked out either yet. We have the idea of how many families might be eligible right now. But we haven't had those conversations. We haven't completed our guidelines, all those types of things. So it is not set in stone yet which families we would start with. But beyond that, I think it would make some sense that a parent potentially could live there for a while and get things set up for their child before the child was returned home. However, the focus of this grant is for the child to return home to the parent. That is what the purpose is. So while there might be a short period of time where a parent is getting acclimated and setting things up, the court order conditions are met so that the child is certainly appropriate to be able to living with the parent, if that helps.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of the documentation that we're talking about tonight, and everybody's done a wonderful job of describing the need, talks about this $327,000 grant, $327,000 grant for 2 years. My first question is, what does the follow-on look like after that 2-year grant is done? What are we on the county board, what are we potentially signing up for or committing to for years 3, 4, 5, whatever? As we all know, government programs come into existence and they never seem to die. So I think it's good that we look forward as well.
I'll give you a short answer, but like Teresa said, as a lawyer, I'm going to talk. We're not signing on, the county board is not signing on to anything after 2 years. There are no, I think Supervisor Marash in one of our conversations said, hey, what strings are attached? There are the requirements that we're going to put in place and Vicki's working on with DCF. But at the end of 2 years, you have not, by virtue of accepting this grant, signed on to do anything. I think the hope that is, if it's not expressly stated in the documents, although I'm pretty sure it is, we'll expressly state it now, is that as Mr. Schmidt referenced, that we can demonstrate through this process that the positive outcomes here and other entities come to the table. We have a partnership list that is, I think, very substantial, but as Christy referenced, we'd love for that to be very large. Sit down and talk with the Hager House and talk about what does that look like. If other nonprofits, and I hope a bunch of people are watching, although it's pretty late, if more will come to the table, to your point, Supervisor, let's have them come to the table. As Vicki said, we would do this now if the places existed for these people to go. And it's not that we would do this, we would be mandated to do it. And in fact, the county is mandated, if there were places to, single-family homes, rentals that were available and a person couldn't afford a portion of it, we pay the rest. We are mandated to do that. And when Michael talked about in the statute, it says the definition of neglect, there is an exemption for reasons other than poverty. So we are mandated by federal and state law to fill that gap and provide those services. But the short answer, what are we signing on to? There's nothing after 2 years. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
Okay, next we have Supervisor Wilhelm.
Thank you. My question is about if when you're interviewing these families that want to come in, are you looking at like job history to make sure that they will be able to hold a job, so when this program does come to an end, they will be able to, go live on their own, and not when the program comes to an end, they're not going to have a place to stay. Is a question I have. And
Yep, thank you. And I'll just kind of flip the way that you might be thinking about how families are going to access this program, because they won't be coming to us to ask for it. We are going to identify the families that we believe are eligible for it and that we think will be successful in this type of setting. And again, the common denominator they would have is that they have the barriers to housing. So absolutely, a job history might be something that they're struggling with. And that's why one of the components of the grant is that case management position that we would contract out for, that would be able to work with people whatever their individual barriers are. That's part of why this project is called Family Keys, because all three counties are going to be looking at what is the keys to helping families be successful in locating permanent housing. And it could be that they struggle with getting a job. So it could be support around that. It could be other things that each family will have something different likely. And that case management position, in addition to all of our staff positions and all of our partner positions, partner support, I already talked about, that case management position would be able to work with the families individually.
I can, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Leonard.
Just to add one thing, and I'm sure everyone got this, but I feel the need to say it. To your point, job history, and to Vicki's point, it's very important. But we are mandated to work with families. Perhaps if someone has whatever their need that we need to address is, sometimes it might be job history and assisting them there. We will tailor the program we deliver and the services we deliver to them. But the foundation of our obligation under state and federal law doesn't change whether you have a poor job history, poor rental history, substance abuse history, you name it. Those mandates exist across the board. And the point, I wanted to piggyback on Vicki's point is and we do this every day. Having sat not in Mike's chair, I did fill in for Scott once in that chair, I think. But having prosecuted those cases for a number of years, every case is unique, but you approach it, and it's always driven by child safety, and it's always that recognition of doing what we can, because we're mandated to do so, to reunify that family. It's going to look and feel different each and every time.
I think one of the keys that was mentioned also, that I just heard, was that they're going to screen the individuals, and some individuals may not be the right fit for that setting. Next we have Supervisor Sandalski.
Thank you. I just got a short question. So are the families are they gonna be required to pay like a portion of the rent, either like pay it up front or like later, maybe when they get back on their feet, kind of to take some responsibility over as far as their rent for the property?
Yes. The families will be required to pay for their own food and personal supplies while they're in the transitional setting. And we also will be requiring them to save money towards a down payment for a more permanent housing situation, and hopefully first month, last month rent, whatever it would end up being. So our team of housing experts who have worked with similar projects are recommending that we wouldn't have people pay for rent in this particular facility, instead have them save their money for the next step, because that's really what we're moving towards, and the grant covers the rent. So we would need verification that they actually are saving, however. So that is a model that tends to be used in transitional type housing, where there is verification that people are actually saving the money for their future next step.
Supervisor Baker.
Thank you. So I've heard this presentation at the HHS and also at the HR Finance, as you're aware, I'm sure. I've pushed back quite a bit and asked a lot of questions about mandates, and this is the first time I've heard that we're mandated to pay rent. So I have another question also, but I would like to hear a lot more details about what cases are we mandated to pay rent, and under what conditions. And I would like to hear that from Michael Pernier if he feels qualified to answer, or from someone who does this, intimately involved with this.
Michael, the Corp Counsel will answer what knowledge he has.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do appreciate the question, Supervisor Baker. Just as a little bit of background, before I took Scott's chair and started impersonating him on a regular basis, I did directly prosecute our child welfare cases for 5 years as the Deputy Corporation Counsel, so that was my main caseload. So I'm familiar with the statutes that apply here. And when we talk about a mandate to pay rent, the mandate here is that the Department of Social Services provide services to families aimed at reunifying the families. If the barrier to reunification is that the family can't get housing or can't pay rent, one of the solutions is assisting them in paying rent. So that's when we talk about mandates to pay rent, the mandate is provide the service that will get the child reunified in the home with the family. If the barrier that's identified is rent, then the department is mandated, legally tasked by the court to provide a service that fills that gap. I hope that helps.
I just also talk about perhaps job training to
Absolutely, and Administrator Leonard brings up a very good point. Rent is not the only way to accomplish that goal. Another way to accomplish that goal is job training to get the parent the tool to be able to support themselves and their family. Rent is not the only way to accomplish that goal, but in certain circumstances, that's an option that is taken.
And yes, and I have spoken in front of you many times, and I know have given lots of details. I believe in one of the first times at the county board, I gave an example of a family that we were paying. We did have a check written for the rent, and by the time they got across town to give the check to the landlord had rented it to someone else who had a better rental history. So I understand that wasn't pulled out as a specific point, but that would be an example, is even when we are using funds to help people to secure housing, because of some of the barriers they have, they're not able to achieve that.
Thank you. Can I have a follow-up question?
Go ahead.
So Supervisor Shavinsky asked what we're signing up for, and the answer was nothing. Or I didn't mean to oversay that, but we often give guidance to the administration. The administration looks to our past decisions as indication of what we have approved, what we agreed to do. So in the vision of success, adequate and safe housing is available to all families, so that lack of such is never a barrier to parents being able to care for their children. I believe that was not read that way earlier, but adequate and safe housing is available to all families, so that lack of such is never a barrier to parents being able to care for their children. That's a very broad vision of success. And my specific question is, Wausau and Marathon County, I believe it originated in Wausau, but asked North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission to do a metro housing study. And in that study, they found that 12.65% of all households in Wausau are severely challenged, I believe is the correct term, for housing, which means that they pay. I'm not sure if this is a definition, it's a draft, but when I looked that up in other similar institutions, I think that definition is they pay 50% or more for their housing, which is a lot. So would this vision a year from now, 2 years from now, when we're done with this program, would this vision of success cover support for those individuals? You know, that because all families need adequate and safe housing such that it is never a barrier to parents being able to care for their children. Thank you.
I'll start, and I'm sure Vicki will add something. I'm gonna, as your administrator, I like to say I'm the person who tries to rein everybody in on scope. Our mandate relates to families that were open to child protection. I said it at Health and Human Services, and I also made reference to it at HR Finance, I believe. The job of government is not, and this is talking about parenting, is not to parent all children that reside in, for this example, Marathon County. We are statutorily obligated to address the needs for those families that are open to Vicki's department. So I would say the vision for success is that the access to that housing that access to housing is not a barrier for child welfare families. I have no doubt that access to housing, to your point, Supervisor Baker, is a barrier for a great many people. I'll tell you, it's certainly a barrier for recruiting right now. When we make job offers to people, and this just happened for a position, that's why I'm bringing it up. The question they asked in response to our job offer was, what's my likelihood of being able to find an affordable one-bedroom apartment? Person was thinking about moving from the East Coast. And that's a tough question to answer, but to your specific point, our obligation, that vision for success is child welfare families, and I think Vicki wanted to add something about phase 2.
Well, again, just the phase 2 is, a potentially broader perspective as the various counties that are involved in this learn more along the way. And so it could end up to be, what we're involved in could be a larger reach. The focus is still going to be on those children who are eligible for child welfare, though. So that was the only distinction I wanted to make.
Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want clarification, just a simple answer on this. Is Family Keys a legal requirement? Must we choose this program to meet our mandated need to protect children?
No.
Okay. After 2 years, so we go with the program, and I know we don't want to talk about long-range questions and all this kind of stuff, but it is important because we talked about mental health therapies. They're in therapists in our schools, and they're in phase 3, right? So we're going potentially into phase 1. Phase 2 is important, even potentially phase 3 and further. So if we then implement this and we now are meeting this mandate, what happens when we say no to phase 2? Are we required to keep it, or can we ditch it with no legal ramification?
Corp Counsel going to answer this. You're asking a legal question.
So from a legal perspective, if the county board elected not to fund a second phase, that phase would not be implemented. The department would have to go back and use other strategies to bridge those barriers that this grant is aimed at addressing. But there would be no obligation or requirement to continue that just because we started with phase 1.
Thank you.
Supervisor Baker.
So one of our questionnaires had referred this as public housing, and to me that seems appropriate because we're putting the county in between a contract that's normally made between private individuals, a renter and a landlord. And typically, I think when municipalities or counties do public housing, they use a public housing authority. I believe that Wausau has a public housing authority. So I would expect or guess, and it's just a conjecture, so that's why I'm asking the question, that one of the reasons for using a public housing authority in the case of using public housing is to protect the entity, the municipality or county from liability. Are we opening ourselves up to liability questions if, God forbid, somebody fell asleep with a cigarette and burned the house down, or, sexual assault, that kind of thing? We haven't traditionally, I don't believe, been in the public housing business, and, Wausau is, and is equipped for that. Are we getting into an area that, we're not equipped to do?
Again, that's a legal question, so I'll ask Corp Counsel to answer if he's prepared to answer that question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Supervisor Baker. Liability, as your corporation counsel, is a word that is in my head most of the day, especially when I examine things that are coming before the board. So first of all, I would first comment, any programs that the county is providing to the community, the county has risk and liability. So that's not a question to me whether there is some liability there. What I think the distinction would be in this case is we're already assuming that liability in placing children in group home settings or in treatment foster homes, in foster care. So this is an extension of that type of liability. The key point for the county is to mitigate the risk as much as we can if we enter into this type of grant. So that's where tightly drafting the lease documents is important, making sure our insurer is comfortable with what we're doing and that we have adequate protection for all the potential liability. Those are all things that have been explored, and pending acceptance, if the grant was accepted, that would be something that would be required to be put into place. But I guess a short answer to your question is there is certainly liability to go along with anything that the county does. And I think that liability in this case is similar to some of the other placements that social services already handles.
And if I could just add one thing to your other specific question about is the county getting into a new area, definition of what constitutes public housing, I'll set aside because the Public Housing Authority, the county has the ability to do that under Chapter 59. I don't view this as a public housing authority, but what I can tell you is that the county does rent apartments and sign leases and then have agreements like Vicki referenced for individuals to stay there in other programs. And I'm looking to Chad in the back because he's familiar, and it looks like Teresa stepped out, but our drug court program, our OWI court program, those models are very similar to what Corporation Counsel Pierner is talking about.
And Supervisor Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question as to, would these three families be there at the entire 2-year period? Or is the intent that once you get them on their feet for a year, that you would also help another 3 families?
The 3 to 4 families is the max that the housing unit could accommodate because of the number of rooms, and that's why we've used that number as a max. Does that mean we're going to have 3 to 4 families there at any given time? No. It's going to be based on need. It's going to be based on the number of children that families have, because that would increase the need for space, as well as the mix of families and how they'll get together, how they'll get along together. So those are all things that we're going to be assessing in terms of looking at that occupancy. So it'll change over time. And we aren't anticipating any family is going to live there for a full year. As mentioned earlier, we're projecting that families will be there between 3 and 9 months. And the reason that we would want them to be moving on by 9 months is so they can get into their more permanent housing while they continue under the court order for several months, so we can assist and support them in that as well. So it truly is transitional. It is not a long-term housing option for any families.
And at $5,800 per month for the rent, if you were talking 3 families, that's a benefit of about $1,900 a month or $23,000 a year. So it is quite a large ask, as well as I just worry about the incentive that it gives other families not to do their best to, if this is something that they know is out there, to have someone else pay $2,300 or $23,000 a year for rent.
That's a great question, and I'll tell you, to build on what Vicki talked about, it's been our experience with those other programs that I talked about, OWI court and drug court, that as transitional housing, because that's what the model is, people our OWI court and drug court participants, it's a short-term housing. I appreciate the logic of all of the individuals here, but I think it's also really important that Vicki talked about, these people are not working with social services because, no offense, Vicki and your team, because they like them. They're working with them because it's a court order, and simply put, working with Vicki and her team is work. And to Vicki's point, they're seeing social workers every day in the transitional setting. If they move out on their own, they're not. It has been our experience with drug court that people like to have autonomy, just like all of us. So we have seen people save their money, get on their feet, and these people are already on their feet, save that money and move out. So I appreciate the logic, because that's how normal, well-adjusted people think. Like, hey, why would I do this when somebody else is going to pay rent for me? But you're going to see Vicki every day or a member of her team. And again, no offense, but you're going to have a lot more. It's not your own place. This is a place, if you think about Salvation Army, you think about we have congregate living facilities in this county that exist to fill various needs. We don't have one to fill this need right now, but for people that are Salvation Army, the women's community is a great example of a congregate living facility where certainly people go there to fill a short-term need, but they develop a plan with staff at the women's community to assure safety and be, again, out on their own. We don't expect anything different here. Build the plan, get self-sufficiently, move out on your own.
Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have one legal question, and then I have one other question. So my legal question kind of gets into the determination of who is going to be chosen, like what the screening questions will be, and is there any possible discrimination possibility in who we decide to put in there? There was the mention that the families will get along. Would someone potentially have a legal case to say, well, I could have been in that housing and you didn't pick me?
From a legal perspective, well, first of all, I'll say anyone can sue the county for anything, and they might not have a case. I would not think that anyone would have a strong claim in that regard. Part of the reason is what was just referred to by Lance and Vicki, is that these folks are being entered into this housing arrangement. It's not like they went out and chose it. It's a requirement under a court order. So the court's going to be involved in approving this as well. That takes some of the liability and concern off of us. Now, certainly when we are screening things, we have to abide by the federal requirements and state requirements to make sure that we're not discriminating. But we also have to apply neutral and sound rationale for why we're choosing that specific family. So as long as we are making those decisions in a sound way and exercising the judgment that the workers do every day, I think the risk of liability is very low on that particular question.
One follow-up? Yeah, this is the non-legal questions. So we're saying that housing is the barrier. Can someone explain why safe and adequate housing is a barrier? I don't quite understand, someone has the issue and what that means. And in relation to that, one of the questions I have is, after the 3 months or 4 months or 6 months or however long they're there, and they've gotten help, and they're ready to transition out, and they move out, like, what housing are they attaining then that's safe and adequate? What happens when they get less support? So we have this kind of very short-term, temporary, transitional thing that we do, and then these people move on. I mean, how are they going to take care of themselves then?
First, objection, compound question. You said one. That was many. First question in your series was, why are some reasons that housing is a barrier? First, and the most simple, as referenced, I believe, by Supervisor Baker, there just isn't enough. There isn't enough. I believe Supervisor Unger is a realtor. So how fast do homes sell? Well, in my neighborhood, a day. How fast are rental units rented? Very quickly. There's not enough. So supply side constraints are one problem. The other part Vicki alluded to already, and this is, again, very consistent to what we see on the treatment court side, which is the individuals that are looking for housing, and they have completed every condition that we're talking about on the court order, mind you. So they've done a lot, but they still have rental histories. Some have criminal histories. And right now, you can be a very discerning landlord. And we have a wonderful thing in the state of Wisconsin. We have very bright sunshine laws, it's late, that allow people to search records on anyone. And there's a disclaimer on the Wisconsin CCAP system that says it can't be used to discriminate in housing. There's a disclaimer on there, but anyone can search for anything. And so people have these barriers. Some have job history barriers. So all those things can make attaining housing difficult. So as Vicki said, even when we do have money available, someone can say, you know what, I have 3 competing offers to rent this property. I will choose the one that as a landlord is less risky, in my view. So then that individual may engage in that. The second part is why this program starts, to your second part of your compound question, why is this going to help? It builds that background. I'll tell you, we, in our treatment courts, we serve as a reference for people when they are looking to go out on their own. And, you sign if, how often or how frequently anyone has tried to rent an apartment in a while. But you have to list references. And we have listed ourselves as a reference. Our Justice System Alternatives Coordinator answers those questions and provides the information that after the individual allows us to do so. And we talk about what it means to be in treatment court and how we recognize that this individual has these things that might cause you to look twice. But let me tell you about how they've done with us in our housing that we provide under that kind of housing first approach to allay a lot of those fears, to your point, Supervisor Dickinson, that could be barriers. So there's the initial barriers piece, but essential to this program is how do you transition people to success long term? They want to be successful. They want their children back and they want to live on their own. But there are absolutely barriers that exist within our community. And we are one of 3 counties that the state of Wisconsin said, hey, we'd like to work with you because they see from the data that they collect, hey, maybe there's an opportunity here. But also we're a very high functioning Department of Social Services. As Vicki said, she's very active on the statewide basis. So how can we start to address those systemic barriers? And you probably have heard of the Ban the Box initiative for employment. The same thing is somewhat true with rental histories, this idea that people look at that history and it's difficult for them to move past this. I think there's a real opportunity with this program that we can get people to see that temporal success, 3 to 9 months, people have demonstrated commitment, will serve as a reference, and then they can go out and be successful on their own.
Supervisor Shafinsky, third and final.
Thank you. My one question would be, we're looking at this for us here, this is a pilot project. Has this approach been done elsewhere, obviously not in the state of Wisconsin, but elsewhere in similar localities across the country, or are we truly on the very leading edge of this? Do we have demonstrated experience and success elsewhere?
I'm not aware that there are other programs like this across the country, and in our discussion with the Department of Children and Families, who have a lot of connections with other states, they did not mention that specifically. So I certainly can inquire on that. While this program itself is similar to some of the aspects of some of the supported housing that Lance has been talking about for drug court and that type of things, it differs in terms of the process where the people are, in terms of being stable and assessed as being safe caregivers for their children. So they're at the end of their work with us, and then they have the eligibility as a family. That's really where it differs. A number of transitional housing projects that are currently running around the county and the state are more for individuals rather than families.
Thank you very much.
And just to piggyback on that, Vicki raised a good point about the difference between treatment court and the people that we envision participating here being on different ends of the spectrum. Just to clarify, we put people in housing in drug and OWI court. They are in the midst of treatment, still dealing with significant issues, whereas on Vicki's side that she's talking about, those people are further through the process. But to your question about other models, I'm not aware of any for child welfare either. But I can tell you, and this is when Chief Deputy Billab was talking about the struggles within the jail and this kind of alluding to transitional housing for jail models, it was about, 3.5, 4 years ago that then Public Safety Chair McEwen and Health and Human Services Chair Boots came back from a NACO conference and discussed at a joint meeting of those two committees about housing, transitional housing models for people leaving correctional institutions, specifically county jails, that were being employed throughout the country. And when the chief deputy said we're 5 years, the experience we're having is 5 years behind other counties, he's absolutely right. That was a presentation at the National Association of Counties previously for that specific, again, different population for sure, but a lot of demonstrated success.
I also was fortunate enough to attend a NACO conference in Miami the LUC, Large Urban Caucus. And in Miami, they created a pilot project and now has gone countywide. Miami-Dade, and it started roughly 5 years ago. And talking about the population that the chief deputy was talking about, when you were talking about, they were effectively taking over because of the weather. They were effectively taking over the beaches, the homeless, and they were affecting tourism, and they were affecting businesses. There was a joint project between the business community and the county to effectuate, in turn, create intense treatment for these individuals and effectively buy or rent housing for them long-term. Now, it's a total different program here, but they found that because of the long-term economic benefit, they've seen a return of tourism, the businesses seen a return of actual economic impact, and they've seen the benefit to actually doing that. So again, a different housing scenario, a different demographic, and a different population. Any other questions for the panel? Okay. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to item 9C2, Public Safety Committee resolutions. Again, 9C2A is the Peace App grant funding for one public safety answering point per county. Any questions on that resolution 45-22? Okay, we will move on to item 9C2B, a resolution honoring the service of the Honorable Judge Greg Huber, and that will be read on Tuesday. Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to announcements and/or requests. I have a couple of announcements. Earlier this week, there was an email sent out to the full county board. This fall, there will be a county forest tour that will take place September 15th from 10 till 3. Each of you as a supervisor is invited. There will also be some emails coming out later, because if you do plan on attending, we do need to have a head count. I talked to the forest manager, and he said he just needed to have a head count so that he could provide for adequate transportation. And also a reminder for each of the supervisors, this June 30th was the end of the second quarter. So there also was an email that went out. Mileage reimbursement requests are due by July 15th, tomorrow, by the end of the day, so that if there's any mileage that the supervisor has driven in official capacity and their committee assignments, that needs to be submitted no later than tomorrow, so that otherwise it won't be approved later on. Any other announcements and/or requests from the board? Supervisor Robinson moved to adjourn. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Boots. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. 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 We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.